On the 7th of October 2023, Hamas and several other Palestinian nationalist militant groups launched coordinated armed incursions from the Gaza Strip into the Gaza Envelope of southern Israel, the first invasion of Israeli territory since the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. In total, 1,139 were killed, 695 Israeli civilians, including 38 children, 71 foreign nationals, and 373 members of the security forces. About 250 Israeli civilians and soldiers were taken as hostages to the Gaza Strip, alive or dead, and including 30 children, with the stated goal to force Israel to exchange them for imprisoned Palestinians. Soon after Israel responded. After Israel responded to the October 7 attack, people began speaking about the issue at Olympia City Council meetings.
Hello, everyone. My name's Emily McHugh. I'm an artist in Olympia. I'm here to urge this council to pass a resolution calling for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. I think it's important that at all levels of government, we'd be putting pressure on the next level. I know city government level but I'm just here to express concern as a citizen, and that there is precedent in other cities for resolutions like this. Now, Detroit is voting on one. Redmond, California has passed one at the city government level to make our position clear. We're witnessing a genocide. And so I'm just here to say that, and appreciate all of your time.
Thank you.
Hi, I am a special ed teacher at Washington Middle School, and I've been really horrified by everything I've been seeing in Gaza over the last few weeks. I spend all of my days caring for some of the most vulnerable students in our community. I put all of my heart and soul into my work, and what I'm seeing in Gaza is Israel bombing innocent children while they're sleeping. And it brings so much pain into my heart, knowing particularly that a lot of these children who are dying in their sleep are special needs kids who, I can just really resonate with them because of the work that I do. So I'm urging you as to do something that a lot of city councils across the country have done, is create a resolution that would urge higher government officials and urge Israel to create a ceasefire to stop the bloodshed of these innocent children while they're sleeping in their beds. There's lots of other city councils across the country that you could look at for specific language of that resolution. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Eva Leach, and I'm here to talk about Palestine. As we all hopefully and unfortunately know, there's an ongoing occupation and genocide of Palestinian people by the Israeli government. Over 11,000 Palestinians in Gaza have been killed by Israeli occupation forces since October 7th, 2023. This number includes more than 4,500 children. More than 28,000 people have been injured, with at least 3,000 people reported missing under the rubble, including at least 1,700 children. We in the US, a huge provider of weaponry and military aid, has a responsibility to disrupt the flow of arms to Israel and demand our government pressure to stop violence against the Palestinian people. I'm asking the City Council to do the following: demand immediate Israeli ceasefire in Palestine, call for the end of military aid to Israel, call for Israel to open borders and allow humanitarian aid to reach Gaza, pass a resolution declaring that the city of Olympia is in opposition to the genocide of Palestinian people, put pressure on our representatives and legislators to support a current bill in Congress, H.R. 3101, which specifies no U.S. funding can be used for ill treatment of Palestinian children. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Peter Lewis, followed by Pete Such, followed by Art Arneson, followed by Michael Cade.
Hi, my name is Peter Lewis. I'm 17 years old. People in Palestine are dying. Their deaths directly funded by our taxes in Washington state. You cannot opt out of this or ignore it. Blood stains all of our hands, but you, as our city council, have a special responsibility to do something about it. The Olympia City Council is directly implicit in this genocide. Every second you spend worrying about something else or pushing this under the rug, people are dying. As a citizen of Washington State, I implore you to show some empathy and a spine. Call for a ceasefire now. Thank you. Free Palestine.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Karina Greenland, and I'm 19 years old. I am here to demand that you call for a ceasefire in Gaza now. As I speak to you, Palestinians are being murdered in cold blood. These are not accidental casualties. This is a deliberate ethnic cleansing. Human Rights Watch states that Israel's actions against the Palestinian people are so severe that they amount to the crimes against humanity of apartheid and persecution. For those who would argue that the debate over a ceasefire is complex, I disagree. Israel has a massive military with nuclear capabilities. Palestine has no military. Israel receives billions of dollars in international aid. Palestine is experiencing a genocide while elected officials like yourselves turn your backs and cite the complexity of the issue. Over 11,200 Palestinians have been killed since the start of October. It's not complex. It's genocide. Condemn Israel. Demand a ceasefire. If you are not in government to protect the lives of innocent people, I don't know what you're doing here. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Kaylin, and when you come to the microphone, you can introduce yourself. Followed by Kaz Voke, can't make it out, followed by Michelle Ryder.
Okay. I'm Callan Daly. I'm 19 years old, and I've been resident of Lacey for a very small amount of time, and I hold the same perspective as a lot of people who have come before me, and I'm here to demand a ceasefire for oh my goodness.
It's all right.
For Israel, sorry. This is the first time here. But it is very important as lawmakers, and I understand that your job is very hard. There are lots of issues for you to address. However, it is you who have the power to take these issues to the top where they belong and to make things right and to save lives. That is why you're here, right? You're here to make people's lives better. And I'm sorry that this isn't as formal as it might be, but Palestinian children, Palestinian lives have the same weight as ours. We all know this. And geez, sorry. We need to do what we can to make things right. And it's part of why I'm working up the courage to sit here now and try to speak to you, because even people like me are seeing what's happening on the news, albeit very slowly, but please, we urge you, call for a ceasefire, create an absolution like other city councils. Free Palestine. Thank you for your time. Sorry.
Thank you. Next, I have Michelle Ryder, followed by Whitney Carr. I'm sorry, Kaz first. Sorry, Kaz. Next, Michelle Ryder, followed by Whitney Carr.
Hey, my name is Kaz Vokun. I'm going to join the chorus talking about Gaza, the genocide in Gaza. Yeah, thank you so much for listening to all of us today. I think that as a community in Olympia, we can do some things to help, and I want to address those. Yeah, as has been stated before, there have been over 2,000 deaths, nearly half of those children, innocent children in Gaza. And it would take me over 2 hours to read the names of the children, just the children, to you. Yeah, this is unprecedented, and it's hard to know what we can do. But I've had the honor of meeting some beautiful Palestinian people in our community and heard that there are many Palestinians in our community that are afraid to go outside right now, afraid to be in public. So I think that us coming together as a community, making a resolution and saying that we do not support the genocide that is happening in Palestine, and we call for a ceasefire, it could be so, so impactful to help our Palestinian neighbors feel supported. I also want to encourage you to use your power as council members to call for the passing of the resolutions that are against the genocide. I think HR 3103 is one. Also the resolution introduced by Cori Bush. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Michelle Ryder, followed by Whitney Carr, followed by Emily McHugh.
My name is Michelle Ryder, and I support an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, along with 2/3 of American voters and 80% of Democrats. I'm speaking tonight because I would like to see the City Council pass a resolution in support of a ceasefire and endorse House Resolution 786, led by Congresswoman Cori Bush. I condemn Hamas's horrific attack on Israel on October 7th. I also condemn Israel for engaging in hospital warfare and turning Ashifa Hospital, Al Quds Hospital, Kaman Adwan Hospital, the Swedish clinic, the Indonesian hospital, the Children's Cancer Hospital, Rantisi Hospital, Al Mahdi Hospital, and others into battlegrounds. I condemn Israel for targeting doctors, health sector workers, journalists, ambulance personnel, civil defense personnel, as well as the bombing of refugee camps, UN facilities, schools, universities, mosques, churches, homes, roads, ambulances, water wells, bakeries, humanitarian aid, sewage systems, and telecommunications infrastructure. I condemn Israel for displacing 3/4 of the population of Gaza under the threat of arms. I condemn Israel for killing an unprecedented 41 journalists and 101 UN workers. I condemn Israel for killing 11,000 Palestinians in a little over 30 days, and 70% of those are women and children. I condemn Israel for imposing a full siege on a captive civilian population, denying them water, fuel, food, electricity, medicine, and humanitarian aid, while dropping more metric tons of explosives on them than were in the nuclear bomb we dropped on Hiroshima. There is no justification for Israel's behavior. I want safety for the people of Israel, but that can't and won't come at the expense of the Palestinians, a people who had nothing to do with the Holocaust. Even if Al-Qaeda or ISIS or the thing you fear most in life were hiding among the people of Gaza, that still would not be justification enough to justify the slaughter and starvation of civilians en masse. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We have Whitney Carr, followed by Emily McHugh, and we're just going to squeeze it in, you guys, 30 minutes. Bob Jacobs.
Hi, I'm Whitney, and I'm here to demand that the city council members pass a resolution, as many cities across the country have already done, declaring that the city of Olympia is in opposition to the genocide of the Palestinian people, and that the people of the city of Olympia demand an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and the unfettered allowance of humanitarian aid into the region. And I want to join my friends in also urging the council to use their positions, because you have the positions of power, to support the bill currently in Congress called HR 3103, which specifies that no U.S. funding can go towards, quote, the ill treatment of Palestinian children. And it's pretty wild that we have to specify that that is the case, but I guess that we do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Emily McHugh, followed by Bob Jacobs, who is our last person signed up for in-person comment.
Hello, everyone. My name is Emily McHugh. I'm an artist in town, and I'm here also to say that I would support a resolution passed by the city council to call for a ceasefire. I spoke last week, so I'm going to keep this really short, but just echo what a lot of people have already said, and that a majority of Americans would support a ceasefire, and that at every level of government, we can give voice to our community, and to and that, you know, you as city council members can put that pressure upwards as well. And yeah, thanks for listening to everyone tonight.
Thank you.
Mayor, point of order.
Sure.
I just had a question. Are we going to come back and respond to public comment after the later session? Because I feel like we had some new folks tonight, and in a large number for us, that it would be good to just take a moment to acknowledge what they came to say.
Okay.
So I want to make sure we're going to provide space for that, and I won't take
Absolutely.
us that way.
Yeah, it's been so long, like I said, since we've had more commenters and we had time in the very beginning of the meeting. What we've done in the past to make it kind of like, so you get the full picture, is we've made responses or questions for staff after we've completed all of the public comment. I can entertain if there's desire here to make some comments at this point, because by the time we get to the second phase of public comment, it'll be quite late tonight. So Councilmember Nguyen?
Maybe we could refrain from speaking on item 6A and address the rest of the commenters.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Okay. Yeah, like that. So if anybody wants to respond to our public commenters tonight, exempting item 6A, because we're going to be discussing that in depth later on tonight. That's great. So anybody want to go? Councilmember Nguyen?
So since we are not touching item 6A at the moment, I really appreciate the folks that have come here, some that have come here for the first time to speak about the tragedy that's happening in Gaza right now. And also want to recognize that it's a really big thing to do to spend your night this way and to come and speak in public comment and with all of these people here with the dais that's elevated in front of you. And it takes for some a different sort of comfortability to do that. And so I just really want to appreciate that. There's so many emotions when you're talking about this. There's all of the ones that are very sort of self-centered, like, wait, what? Of course I care about people. We're sitting here, we're spending our night this way too. Like, of course we're trying to, you hear that the rental housing or possible rental registry is before us tonight. And we got a lot of people that are feeling a way about that. There's all these different things to go through. We have a report out, just a small one about climate. That's a big deal. And so we have all these things before us that impact Olympians here right now and that we are trying to work on. And then there's all of the rest of the world, right? There's all of those big things that are happening. And so I do appreciate you taking the time. And for some, I think Emily has left, but coming back again to say, hey, you should really say something about this. You should do something, even though we are a small local government that for the most part is focused on the issues in front of us that are before Olympians now. But what we're hearing tonight, I think, from Olympians is that whatever power we do have, whatever privilege we do hold, we should move that upward. I really appreciate when folks come with possible solutions, with things, with suggestions at least to look at. So I will, and I feel like my council mates will too, but I'll let them speak for themselves, but look at some past resolutions. I told Emily I was going to do that last week. I still intend to continue. And then also I heard that, possible support for HR 3101 and then another one for HR 786. Really, really appreciate that. And then the resolution overall, I'm not sure what it will look like, but I will work with my colleagues to hopefully form, we don't do things alone, we do things together, some sort of responses and figure out what makes sense for our city and how we can push that pressure upward, like you were saying. So yeah, it's your comments. I think there was like at least 10 of you. Your comments and the variety of things that you said really, it reminds us to take a moment from business as usual and recognize the humanity. And I saw a lot of kind of tearing up around the room and a lot of heartfelt thoughts. And so while some of it was hard to hear, things like, having a spine and stuff, we got to kind of like look through that and not get defensive, though it can be hard sometimes, and realize that, yeah, well, maybe we're not a big federal government, we don't really play in international waters too much, but maybe there's something we can do. So I appreciate these smart suggestions brought forward and I'll explore them. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Cooper, followed by Councilmember Parsley, followed by Mayor Pro Tem Gilman.
Thank you, Mayor Selby. I really appreciate us going back. For me, it's good to have this conversation before we move into our agenda, just because it can give us the headspace. I think it's really important, and I wanted to make sure that these folks, 10 of them exactly, felt heard. It was it's a big number actually for us to have talking about one topic, not reading the same message over and over again, and focus on the global humanity and how we can come together as human beings, I think is what I heard. And the hard part about this is all of the politics and long-term history, and like trying to clear the picture of what you want to say while doing right by friends and family who are on all sides of the issue. I think everybody agrees that no one should be dying, though, and especially the innocent. And so, how can we create a statement that brings our equity and our commitment to peace in the Olympia way to the table? I would love to, be a part of something like that.
Right, thank you. Next, Councilmember Parsley, followed by Mayor Pro Tem Gilman.
I have to, thank Councilmember Cooper and the mayor for letting us address this, because it is emotional. You can't read the news without feeling the impact. And when I belong to some Physicians Against Without Borders, and hearing that they're doing surgery without anesthesia just made me, as a medical professional, sick to my stomach. There's a lot of death going on, and I have no problem with working with my council mates, looking through the resolutions that have been put out there that allow us to match our values as a city and put forward a ceasefire resolution. It makes sense to me, but I also think we need to look at what we can do. And as Councilmember Nguyen said, from our little hamlet, push something upward. But absolutely.
Thank you. And last, I have Councilmember Gilman, or Mayor Pro Tem Gilman.
I'll take either one. First, I appreciated Michael Cade coming in to elevate another partnership that we've had with the Scale Up and the other small business, both incubating and helping people grow programs over the last several years. I'm really proud of that, and I think that's part of our ability to be resilient through the pandemic with the businesses downtown. So I wanted to appreciate that. Thank you to the folks who spoke for peace and a ceasefire. That the idea that we should use council power to take the issue of peace to the top, I think makes sense. And we try to be judicious about how often we weigh in on issues that are way beyond the city. But I think it's the right time to join the congressional staffers and the State Department employees who both have recently offered dissenting letters calling for an immediate ceasefire. And I also would be proud to send to Cori Bush a letter saying that we support her House Resolution 786 and want her and her co-sponsors to have traction. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so I think we're ready to move on now. We've done consent count. What? Oh, you are okay. I'm so sorry. Councilmember Payne.
Yes, so that's my bad, Madam Mayor. I initially said that I would not speak this evening, but nevertheless, I am going to because I feel like there is a very important voice that is missing in the room in this conversation. As the only Jewish person on this council, the day after, on October 8th, I saw in our community that our community was standing in solidarity with the Palestinian people instantly. So my question is, how much of this is about the state of Israel's response? I did not see any people in our chambers demanding that the hostages that Hamas still has be returned. I am witnessing people in this chamber tonight blaming members of the city council for not acting on a resolution that would essentially be one of many that I'm not sure would move the needle in one direction or another, because we are talking about geopolitical complicated matters. And frankly, it is Hamas's fault that we are here. And I feel that it needs to be said publicly. I understand that the state of Israel has a right-wing government that is not in line with the city of Olympia's values. And in fact, they're not even in line with majority of American Jews or Jews around the world. But I feel that we conflate these conversations. And frankly, I feel that we need to not do that. We are falling prey to the intentions of this terrorist organization that wants us to conflate these issues and to join them in their efforts to hate the state of Israel. And it is very difficult to watch. I see it happening. And there was a ceasefire on October 6th, and Hamas broke it. And so my question is, when is, if we call for a ceasefire, when is the ceasefire going to be broken again? In 10 years, 20 years? How much longer? That being said, I do recognize that there is horrible violence. And in fact, I would argue that Hamas knew that there would be. They intentionally attacked when they had a right-wing conservative as their leader. And that should tell you something. They knew that Israel would respond with force. And so I want to be the person on this dais and in this room to offer another voice, that we also have a very active Jewish community here who is listening to all of these words tonight, begging for somebody to recognize how this all started, where this came from, and frankly, for somebody to speak up about the hostages that we want back. And so with that being said, I am happy to explore and consider language around what a potential resolution could look like. Obviously, we know that civilian casualties on any side is always something that should be condemned, but it is much more complicated. And I will not simply allow us to dismiss that simply for the sake of trying to make it seem like we need to take a specific side, because that's just what we need to do in America is fall on a binary scale. It is much more complicated. It is, and we should approach it as such. And so I just want to thank you, Madam Mayor, for and the council for giving me the space and the time to process this. And I will be happy to work with all of you on what a potential resolution could look like. Thank you.
So I have to respond to our mayor-elect, Payne. That took so much courage. And that is a voice that we're not hearing. And we need to hear all voices. So I thank you for coming, but I also thank you for representing an unrepresented group up here in many ways. And just gratitude. Thank you. Councilmember Cooper.
Yeah, I want to echo that, because it needs to be heard. And honestly, why I was cagey about where I am, because I don't know where I am, because it's really hard to understand geopolitical issues other than I know, people should be in their homes sleeping at night and not have danger of violence. And so on all sides of the conversation. So I'd love to partner with you and maybe some of our another council member and our staff to work on how to get it right. I love that term, mayor-elect, as well. So I just want to say that out loud again.
I had to get that in there. Councilmember Parsley, and then we're going to need to move on.
Thank you, Mayor-elect. I appreciate that. And when I said that a ceasefire should exist within our values are not to support hate, whether it be anti-Semitism or Islamophobia. Sorry, had trouble saying that. I absolutely agree the language should be carefully crafted. I'm for ceasefire and I'm for peace. That is what I'm for, okay? And I agree with Mayor-elect Payne.
Thank you, Councilmember Nguyen.
Let's figure out how to say all of that, okay? We don't want people to die. We don't want there to be anti-Semitism. We don't want there to be Islamophobia. We will figure it out. There's a lot of emotions, and this is a room of a lot of emotions. It sways very sad to very joyful. And I also, while I'm proud of everyone that's spoken up tonight. even in opposition of the rental registry. It is, but obviously there's a lot of thoughts on this dais, so let's get together and figure out what we're going to say. Thanks.
So we have people in chambers that have signed up for public comment, and we have people that have signed up remotely.
Hello, my name is Maeve Johnson. I'm a community member. I live in Eastside Olympia, and I just want to come as a member of the community to express my support for the ceasefire resolution. I think we need to stand up as a community and do our part to end the Israeli apartheid occupation in Gaza and in the West Bank and in all of Palestine. I have seen the Olympia community come together on this. I think all the polling shows that the majority of Americans are at this point in support of a ceasefire. And I think it is important for the city council, if it wants to maintain its credibility, to publicly and firmly support a ceasefire and an end to US support to Israel. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Kay Nyberg, followed by Helena Lunt, followed by Eva Leach.
Hi, I'm Kay. I'm a special ed teacher at Washington Middle School, and I am in support of a resolution by the City Council to call for a ceasefire in the Israel's war in Gaza. As a special ed teacher, I think about the well-being of children, and in this particular instance, I have been reading some horrific numbers, and the latest numbers that I've been finding is that over 5,000 children have been killed by the Israeli occupation forces over the last 46 days, 5,000 plus kids. And thinking in particular about how many disabled young people there are in Gaza because of the occupation, it comes home to me how brutal this all is, because I know I know young people, I know just how much joy and what a miracle young people are, and to see them just ripped out of their families while they're sleeping in their apartments is just so shocking. And other cities have taken stances on similar issues, like many cities took a stance against the invasion of Iraq or other foreign policy matters. And I think it's an appropriate and relevant thing for a progressive city like Olympia to take a stance against an ongoing genocide. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Helena Lunt, followed by Eva Leach, followed by Kaz Vokun.
Hi, my name is Helena Lant. I've been a constituent of Olympia for 5 years, most of which I've spent working for the Thurston County Food Bank. As an advocate for the basic rights of all human beings, I'm here to join the voices urging City Council to sign onto the proposed resolution for a ceasefire. In my years of work for the food bank, I saw many City Council members volunteer to help put food on the tables of the people of Olympia. If I'm not mistaken, that's where I met several of you for the first time, including Councilman Gilman and Mayor Selby. Having served this community in depth, I've seen what the impacts of hunger and food insecurity can do to a human body. In addition to the endless siege and medical warfare on the people of Gaza, Palestinians are currently experiencing an emergency level lack of food due to the militarized shutdown of trade corridors into Gaza. The World Food Program, a global humanitarian food aid organization, states as of November 16th that, quote, supplies of food and water are practically non-existent in Gaza, and only a fraction of what is needed is arriving through the borders. With winter fast approaching, unsafe and overcrowded shelters, and the lack of clean water, civilians are facing the immediate possibility of starvation. The food that has entered Gaza is only enough to meet 7% of the people's daily minimum caloric needs, end quote. To put this in context, this is roughly the equivalent to splitting this bag of chips between you and your spouse every day. As you may know, a cholera outbreak has also taken place in the aftermath of the water shortage. I've seen City Council vote time and time again in favor of expanding food access to the people of Olympia, and I ask that you keep this ethic in mind as you consider signing onto this resolution. Starvation is a slow and brutal way to die, and hundreds of Palestinians are facing this fate currently. Thank you for your time, and I hope you each follow what's in your heart.
Thank you. Next, we have Eva Leach, followed by Kaz V, followed by Rebecca Iriv.
Hello, my name's Eva Leach. I live in Olympia, Washington. I want to talk about just a few of the war crimes committed by Israel in the past month and a half against the Palestinian people. Keep in mind that 2 minutes is not enough time to list them all. Since October 7th, Israel has bombed 39 health facilities, including 13 hospitals, 5 refugee camps, 76 mosques, 3 churches, over 250 schools, 23,000 residential units, 200 medical workers, at least 50 journalists have been killed, and multiple humanitarian aid convoys have been bombed. These are war crimes. In over a month, Israel has not been able to offer a single piece of evidence that any of the hospitals or refugee camps are Hamas bases, and has publicly admitted multiple times to falsifying evidence of Hamas activity. All the while, news outlets continue to spread misinformation to the American people, glossing over these confessions of guilt from Israeli officials. Israel has displaced nearly 2 million people, many thousands of whom are injured to the point of immobility in the past month, usually with only an hour's notice before the bombing begins. These are war crimes. Israel has intentionally bombed resources such as food, water, fuel, and electricity, and has actively prevented nearly all aid from going into the Gaza Strip to provide life-saving care. These are war crimes. Israel has used white phosphorus bombs multiple times on Palestinians in Gaza. This is a war crime. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Just a point of, I don't know what's the point of, but we can't see the timer on Zoom that's in the room. So I would just ask if somebody can let me know. And we also can't see the lights because the names are across the bottom. We can't see the colored lights. So if somebody runs long, I'm going to have somebody else tell me because I can't tell from here. Thank you. Next, I have Kaz V, followed by Rebecca Iriv, followed by Sky Costello.
Hey, my name's Kaz. Just wanted to say that the evidence that was presented by Eva's statement is just a very small amount of evidence that signals violations of the 4th Geneva Conventions, Articles 18, 20, 23, 49, 53, 55, 56, the Geneva Convention Protocol 1 of 1977, Articles 12, 15, 35, 40, 51, 52, 53, 54, 73, 75, 77, and 79, the Certain Conventional Weapons Protocol 3, and the Genocide Convention, Article 3. Councilmember Cooper, as a veteran in the U.S. Army, I'm sure that you have extensive knowledge of international law protocols and corroborate the statements that we've made today. I also remember you saying last week that it feels difficult to have an opinion on the matter because this is a complicated geopolitical issue. I want to encourage you and the rest of the council to see that war crimes are not complicated to stand against. Mass murder of civilians is not complicated to stand against. Mass bombing of essential infrastructure is not complicated to stand against. Forced displacement of millions is not complicated to stand against. The murder of thousands of babies, children, mothers, and fathers is not complicated to stand against. And if somebody is telling you that these things are too complicated to have an opinion on, they are manipulating your hearts, your ethics, and your humanity. You've had a resolution emailed to you, I believe it was yesterday afternoon. There are hundreds and hundreds of community members that are in support of this resolution, and I hope that you consider passing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Rebecca Iriv, followed by Sky Costello.
My name is Rebecca Iriv. I am queer, disabled, and a Jewish clergy, a Kohenet. I grew up in a Zionist family and a deeply anti-Semitic town in South Jersey. Pennies were thrown at me, a swastika was drawn on my chair, and there were openly skinhead Nazis in my public school. I moved to Olympia in 1999 and found a beloved Jewish queer community and was educated by an Israeli professor about the Israeli occupation of Palestine. Our central prayer in Judaism is called the Shema. The prayer essentially translates as, listen, God is one. The essence of Judaism teaches us we are all one collective being. Another teaching of Judaism tells us that within each person is an entire universe. So to kill someone is to destroy an entire world. Our cousins, those of Muslim faith, have a similar teaching. This is only one of many teachings that bond us together. For many decades before 1948, Jews, Muslims, and Christians lived in harmony together in the land of Palestine. After the Holocaust, the greatest single wounding to the Jewish people in our history, the powers that be, European powers and the US, used the opportunity to support an extremely traumatized people to colonize Palestine and ethnically cleanse Palestinians. They needed a stronghold in the Middle East. Zionism was originally brought to popularity by Balfour in the UK decades before as an anti-Semitic solution to dealing with Europe's Jewish problem. I am under no illusion Israel was ever for the Jews or safe for the Jews. It's the opposite. There has been a strategic media campaign to manipulate us into believing Jewish safety is dependent on the state of Israel. The only thing dependent on the state of Israel is capitalism and militarism. That's why the US and other European countries support it. Jewish safety lies in solidarity with other oppressed people. Zionism is not Judaism. Zionism is colonialism. I support the county to adopt this resolution. It is not anti-Semitic.
Thank you. Next, I have Mike Hubbard, followed by Peter Lewis, followed by Karina Greenlee. I'm sorry, Sky Costello is next, followed by Mike Hubbard. Okay.
Okay. My name is Sky Costello. I'm here to ask the city council members to take the moral stand of our generation and support the resolution for ceasefire. Growing up, we were taught that the greatest man-made catastrophe in human history was the Holocaust. I grew up with my grandmother telling me stories of how as a small girl, she hid under a table and watched as her entire family was taken away to the camps. She was the only one in her bloodline who survived the Holocaust. We grew up asking ourselves how this could have happened, how anyone could see the massacres, see countless Jewish and Roma communities burnt to the ground and do nothing, how people could have actively chosen to commit those crimes against humanity, how millions chose to support them. The answer is complicated, but I think we as Americans have more clarity in this very historical moment than at perhaps any point since the end of the Great War. We are seeing another genocide happening before our very eyes. As of a few days ago, 900 Palestinian bloodlines have been wiped out by Israeli bombings since October 7th. The number now is undoubtedly higher. Nearly every scholar of genocide in the world has named what Israel is doing to Palestine for what it is, genocide. Do not let Zionist weaponization of the trauma of the Holocaust blind you to that reality. Hamas does not represent Palestinians in Palestine. Israel knows that the hospitals, schools, water treatment facilities, refugee camps, bakeries, and countless other civilian facilities they have bombed in Gaza and now in the West Bank, where there are no Hamas operations, are not legitimate military targets. Collective punishment is a war crime. This is a genocide, not an anti-terrorism campaign. Throughout human history, the area now known as Palestine has been an ethnically and religiously diverse part of the world. What anti-Zionists are fighting for is a world where Jews, Muslims, and Christians of all ethnicities can live together as equals in Palestine. Israel's expansion of their genocide to even the West Bank, where there are no Hamas operations, has made it beyond clear that they're not that part. Never again means no more genocide. Never again for anyone. Please support this resolution for ceasefire.
Thank you. Next, I have Mike Hubbard, followed by Peter Lewis, followed by Karina Greenlee.
Yeah, I'm Mike Hubbard, and I'm a retired actuary and mathematician. And I had the good fortune to teach for a year and a half in Egypt in '99 and 2000. And learned a lot from my students at Cairo University. I also, I want to urge you to support as a minimum, the ceasefire, an immediate ceasefire, and some sort of legislation to make the U.S. to provide some accountability for the use of U.S. weapons that are sold to Israel. And what I really want to do is I want to give you a little bit of context. I was in West Bank in 2006, October, November, and spent a week in Hebron. Hebron, or Al-Khalil, is a city in the West Bank and home of the Abrahami Mosque. And at that mosque, 29 Palestinians were murdered in cold blood by an American Jew from Brooklyn. Anyway, I was in Hebron, and I was tasked with protecting a Palestinian home there. And me and my British colleagues were attacked by 2 settlers. They knocked him off a rock wall, and he suffered a laceration of his scalp. And we filmed the whole thing. But anyway, this was typical of settler behavior, and we need to protect the Palestinians in the West Bank from settlers and the army. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next, we have Peter Lewis, followed by Karina Greenlee, followed by Jenica Martinez.
Hello, my name is Peter Lewis. I'm 17 years old, and I'm here to call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The majority of Americans support a ceasefire, and yet almost no elected officials have come out in agreement. What is your job? To be so neutral as to call for nothing, do nothing, and be perfectly re-electable? Or to listen to constituents and the millions of people around the world screaming for this atrocity to end? You cannot hide behind thin paper walls and cloud the issue by talking about terrorism or condemning Hamas while simply standing by while genocide is committed against innocent civilians. It is not right. And as the City Council of Olympia, it is your duty to listen and do everything in your power to stop this now. Call for a ceasefire. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Karina Greenlee, followed by Jenica Martinez, followed by Elsie Sable.
My name is Karina Greenlee, and I'm 19 years old. 13,000 Palestinians have been murdered since October 7th. When will it be enough for you to act? Councilmember Payne, I know you're not here right now, but I hope you hear this later. I had a great deal of respect for you, and I could not believe when your first response to our calls last week for a ceasefire was, "This is Hamas's fault." How many people have to die before all of you realize that one terrorist attack, no matter how atrocious, does not justify the slaughter of an entire population whose only crime is a shared nationality with a terrorist organization? If this was how the world operated, none of us would be alive. Why are the Palestinian people the exception to our common understanding that collective punishment is senseless violence? Do each of you refuse to condemn Israel and call for a ceasefire because you genuinely believe that the Palestinian people deserve this? Or is it cowardice? Are you so afraid to damage your political image by standing up against true injustice? Tonight, I want each of you to look up direct footage from Palestine. I want you to watch a video of tiny children covered in horrible burns and shaking with shock, or scroll through images of entire families killed under the rubble of their homes. I want you to see what happens to real people when politicians turn their backs to protect their political image. Enough is enough. Condemn Israel. Call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza.
Next, I have Elsie Sable, followed by Peyton Steve, followed by Shade Osuna.
Hello, my name is Jenica Martinez. And I was here last week, and I was wondering about the Bill 3103. It seemed like a lot of people didn't know what that was, myself included, so I looked it up. And I'm just going to read it from the site, from the House site here. It's defending the human rights of Palestinian children and families living under Israeli Military Occupation Act to prohibit Israel from using U.S. taxpayer dollars on the military detention, abuse, or ill treatment of Palestinian children in Israeli military detention, to support the seizure and destruction of Palestinian property and homes in violation of international humanitarian law, or on any support or assistance for Israel's unilateral annexation of Palestinian territory in violation of international humanitarian law. Yeah, it says also Israel is a U.S. ally and has been for the past 25 years. And yeah, last week, I also, this is to Mayor-elect, which is not here. Yeah, last week, Mayor-elect, you said that this is Hamas's fault. I think that we're at fault by using our U.S. taxpayers' money, and it should be on your conscience as a U.S. representative that has allowed this to continue, and by not using your power to stand on the side of putting an end to yet another genocide, more killings of oppressed people in the streets while the world watches on the sidelines. This is why we're here, to stand up for what we believe in, and bombing and caged people is not what we're in favor of. Let's take a moment to think about when we're younger, learning about the Holocaust and thinking, no freaking ways that can happen when we're here. But it's happening now. So don't go down in history as another representative person of power who did nothing, stuck in indecision. Ceasefire.
Thank you. Next, I have Elsie Sable, followed by Peyton Steve.
Okay. Hello, my name is Elsie Sable. I'm 18 years old and I've lived in Olympia for those 18 years. I'd like to address what the city council members said last week in regards to a ceasefire in Gaza. This is not complicated. I know that as an elected official, you're used to everything being complicated with so many different ideas and opinions. But what is happening now is not hard to understand. People are being murdered. They're being bombed in their homes. They're being starved and deprived of clean water. The Israeli government designates safe routes for refugees and then kills those trying to escape. I believe it is your duty, not as council members or elected officials, but as human beings with a heart, to recognize the suffering of others and try to stop it. Over 13,000 people have been killed so far. I want you to take a moment and imagine yourself. Imagine all of the ambitions and experiences and loved ones you've had in your life. It's a lot, isn't it? Every single person who has been killed in Palestine was just like that. They're complicated human beings who feel pain and hurt and joy. Now, imagine you were suffocating, buried under the rubble of your house, hoping that against all odds, your family somehow survived. And now multiply that feeling by 13,000. It's unimaginable. If you stand against murder, I'll repeat that. If you think innocent civilians should not be murdered, please sign on to the resolution and show that our city doesn't condone senseless violence. Not in Palestine, not anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Shade Osuna, followed by Emily Antoon Walsh.
Hi, I'm Peyton Stever. I live downtown, and I wanted to speak briefly in support of the City of Olympia passing a resolution in support of a ceasefire and peaceful of Gaza. Olympia has a history of association with people of Gaza dating back to the tragic death of Rachel Corrie. Since then, there has been a movement in Olympia to become a sister city of Rafah, unfortunately never made official. There's been an effort to preserve that downtown in the mural that you can go visit. And our own Olympia Food Co-op has been a leader in the boycott, divest, and sanction movement. This history was why it's uniquely important that Olympia pass a resolution. Not only will it be a stand for justice, but it'll also be a message to the people of Gaza who are facing violence and displacement that we have not forgotten them. Olympia has chosen to be a sanctuary city and a city of peace. And it's been that way for many decades. Rafah has been forced to become a sanctuary by events. We should live up to the commitments we made in the past. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, I have Shade Osuna, followed by Emily Antoon Walsh.
Hello, my name is Shade. I don't have much to add that hasn't already been said, but I support a ceasefire in Gaza and Palestinian freedom and survival at all times. There can be no military solution to the genocide that's currently ongoing. And so we're asking for you as politicians to support a political answer. Thank you.
Last for in chambers, we have Emily Antoon Walsh.
Hello, my name is Dr. Emily Antoon Walsh. I'm a medical doctor and I'm a pediatrician. You know, we just came through a pandemic in which some of the first to die were medical professionals who cared for people. I work in a hospital. I go to deliveries. I care for newborns in the moment they're born, as well as children with asthma, teenagers in crisis. I often work nights. I come out of the hospital, and every time I come out of the hospital now, I come out of it to news of hospitals being attacked and children being killed. One child has been killed every 10 minutes. This is an increase in the rate of death from some weeks ago in which it was one child every 15 minutes. I'm going to read you numbers that are now outdated. It's 6,000 children now. The last number I have of the missing under the rubble were 1,700 children. I think it's actually more like 3,000 or 4,000 who are missing. These are undercounts. These do not include the children who have died of dehydration and water shut off to 2.3 million people. It does not include preventable diseases. Cancer treatments were stopped. How do you get insulin if your child has DKA? I know that parents have watched their children die of DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis. I have seen videos in the past few weeks of children in a state of dehydration that I've read about in textbooks. I have never seen in real life. Never seen in real life. Now I've seen it. Another way that we can think about this is the mode age group. The age most represented among the dead in Gaza is 5-year-olds. I have a kindergartner. So I have emailed all of you. I've included a list of documents including city councils that have called for ceasefire and references to call for ceasefire. If you don't like this resolution, pick another one and please pass it because we have to say something. I have lived in Israel. I have worked in Israel. I can attest to the fact that it is an apartheid system, and I could talk endlessly about that, but I have 10 seconds left. So this is the context in which we have to understand the violence against Palestinian children. The El Rantisi Hospital for Children was bombed. The staff were forced out at gunpoint, leaving children in their beds. The cancer center, the only cancer center in Gaza for children, was bombed. These are all intentional. Ceasefire now.
Thank you. I want to remind people as well, if you didn't have time to complete your statements, you can email the city council. Now we're going to go to remote. We only have 3 minutes left, so I'll probably try to get through 2 people that were remote. I'm going to start with Tila Hogel, followed by Joanne Freeman.
Eva does not seem to be signed in, and neither does Joanne.
Okay, then I'm going to go to Desiree Tolliver.
Desiree's traveling.
After Desiree, we'll have William Jernigan.
Is it okay if I start now?
Yes.
I just didn't know. Sorry, I don't see a timer on here, so I didn't know if there was one that was going to pop up.
Oh, yeah, there's blue sky. There it is.
Okay, thank you. So I want to say to the Olympians who showed up, it is amazing, it is inspirational, and I've always said that love is an action word, and each speaker here is showing action. Action to a performer is when it's time to cue the tears. Every representative who is on city council is aware of everything that is happening, and if they aren't aware, they have chosen to remain ignorant. While Olympia is valued as a city of progression, while Olympia is seen as a safe zone and Washington as a whole is seen as that, it is time for progressives to be progressive when times are the darkest. It is easy to lead everyone through a field of daisies during the daylight, and Dontae ran on a platform of being something completely different and something completely inspirational, and we cannot just hide behind our identities as a form of inspiration. we have to take appropriate action. We have to be willing to be wrong and to correct ourselves even when we're wrong or with new information. Dontae and I, after the League of Women Voters Conference, had a very long conversation about our backgrounds, about our similarities, about our differences. One of our differences is that I know Dontae knows it's okay to be wrong. I know he knows it's okay to stand on new information, and I know he knows it's okay to be a leader. But I need him to act on it. Being reelected is not more important than people's lives. And I would hope that outside of the performance that is in Olympia, that the city claims is all the programs that they have for houseless people that are all unfunded, that we wouldn't do that across the world when there are people dying with every 10 minutes. I hope that Cheryl, as a current mayor, I hope as Dontae as a future mayor, and I hope the mayor pro tem can lead the rest of the council into the right direction of speaking against what is happening. That's it.
Thank you.
So I'm here today to ask you to support the ceasefire resolution that we sent to you yesterday, which has already been endorsed by over 100 local community organizations and individuals who are asking you to use your position of influence to call for an end to Israeli violence against Palestinians, which over the past 45 days has killed over 14,000 people, 5,500 of whom are children. I've been sitting here trying to understand how anyone could possibly justify this atrocity to themselves, and I keep coming back to this common propaganda term, human shields. And the corporate media constantly claims that Israel can't help murdering all these children because Hamas is using them as human shields, positioning their fighters near civilians so that Israel has to bomb the children to target these terrorists. But would this logic apply the other way around? In Israel, nearly every adult, because of the draft, is an active reserve or former military member of the military. Does this make anyone around them a human shield? If an IDF commander is giving a talk at an elementary school, would you condone Hamas blowing up the school as a legitimate act of war? Of course not. And the reason this ridiculous argument is only applied to one side is because of rampant Islamophobia that dehumanizes Palestinian children and civilians and views them as less valuable. Justifying the murder of hundreds of civilians to kill one military target is never applied to US military allies like Israel or other people that we consider as human beings. The violence of October 7th is being used as a pretext for the current Israeli assault on Gaza's civilian population. All of them, all 2.3 million of them. Obviously, the mass murder of civilians is something that should be condemned. Always. But at the same time, we should never use one atrocity as a justification for another. And as we pointed out in our resolution and at last week's meeting, this violence did not start on October 7th, but is simply the latest installment of violence rooted in 75-year history of Israeli colonization, apartheid, and genocide. Please take a public stance against genocide and the mass murder of children. Free Palestine, ceasefire now. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Kendra Obam, followed by Nicole Hughes.
Kendra's traveling.
Just let me know when you can hear me.
We can hear you.
All right. Is the timer going? I can't see.
Yeah, we can see you and we can hear you. You can start.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Kendra. I'm here this evening to urge City Council to call for a ceasefire and support the resolution currently being put forth that has over 100 endorsers from doctors, rabbis, teachers, nonprofits, schools, and community members. There are some foundational concepts I want to contribute to making clear about the concept of Zionism and the campaign to protect it. When we look at the founding of Israel, we have to start in 1987 at the First Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland, occurring over 30 years before the beginning of the Holocaust. During these meetings, it was common knowledge that to establish a Zionist homeland, strategies would need to be developed to systematically displace and dispossess the original inhabitants, whether they headed for Uganda, Argentina, or Palestine, which were being offered at the time by Britain, which also uncovers the myth about the return to Palestine that has been used to justify the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians and deny them the right to return. Today, we see U.S. policy, politicians, legislation, and the use of U.S. tax dollars heavily influenced by pro-Israel lobby groups who are determined to define anti-Semitism to include critiques of the settler colonial apartheid state of Israel. AIPAC, formerly known as American Zionist Council for Public Affairs, brags that 98% of its candidates get elected, along with massive amounts of money and a vast network of political support, including mobilizing far-right Christians to support Israel as an effort to usher in the coming of Christ via genocide. They also provide politicians with support teams and educate them with talking points misrepresenting history and Judaism. This list also includes other right-leaning groups and think tanks, including American Jewish Committee, Anti-Defamation League, American Jewish Congress, Zionist Organization America, the list goes on. And when we look at our representatives here in Washington State and Olympia, we're faced with the horrible truth that our reps are swayed by a combination of pro-Israel lobby groups and weapons contractors that have backed and contributed to the campaigns of Marilyn Strickland, Patty Murray, Maria Cantwell, and Cheryl Selby, all of whom can be found in Zionist voting guides. I want to express extreme concern for the Zionist-leaning views expressed by Dontae last week. It is my hope that he and all of you will be clarifying your stance as being more deeply founded in racial justice and human rights. Thank you.
Next, we have Nicole Hughes, followed by Arlo Dolvin.
Nicole is traveling.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. My name is Nicole Hughes, and I am a Jewish homeowner, business owner, taxpayer, and voter here in Olympia. I am here today to voice my support for the grassroots organized proposal for a city resolution expressing support for the Palestinian people and condemnation for the genocidal white supremacist project of the so-called State of Israel. I am also here to correct the record on a number of points of misinformation that were unfortunately shared during last week's meeting. First and foremost, as an American Jew, the so-called State of Israel does not represent me. Its actions, including the murder of over 13,000 Palestinians since October 7th, do not represent the values of the Jewish faith. Its existence as an illegal apartheid ethno-state does not make me safer as a Jew. So-called Israel is neither my ancestral nor my spiritual homeland. And as a Jewish resident of the city of Olympia, Mayor-elect Payne does not speak for me. Last week, Mayor-elect Payne repeated the Israeli propaganda talking point: the Hamas and other parties of the Palestinian resistance broke a quote-unquote ceasefire that existed on October 6th. This is a fiction. As of August 28th, 2023, over 200 Palestinians, including dozens of children, had already been killed by Israel's apartheid regime. In May 2022, Palestinian-American journalist Shireen Abu Akleh was assassinated by an Israeli sniper while covering an illegal raid on the Jenin refugee camp in the occupied West Bank. To this day, her murderers have still not been brought to justice. As the home of Rachel Corrie, another American who was murdered by the Israeli apartheid regime in 2003, the city of Olympia has a particular duty to honor her legacy. By failing to act in support of Palestine in this critical moment, the city of Olympia does a gross disservice to her memory. As a Jew, as an Olympian, as a Washingtonian, and as an American, I stand with the people of Palestine, and I urge you to do so as well. Palestine will be free. Thank you.
Mayor, you're muted.
Thank you. Next, I have Arlo Dolvin, followed by Steve Dallaire.
Arlo is traveling.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
My name is Arlo. I have lived in Olympia for the last 5 years. I'm on the east side. I'm here to urge you to sign the resolution for a ceasefire in Gaza. I've become increasingly concerned with the popular and misguided conflation of Jews and Israel. For the last month and a half, Israel's been committing nothing short of genocide in Gaza. Over 13,000 Palestinians have been killed, thousands of which have been children. The Israeli finance minister has said that Israel will no longer accept any independent entity in Gaza. If this happened anywhere in the Western world, it would instantly be condemned by world leaders, and the conflict would be put to an end. But there's a really pervasive notion that Israel exists to protect Jews, and that its so-called self-defense is in the name of Jewish security. Well, let me tell you, it's not. I do not want genocide harnessed in my name, and 3 generations of Jews in my family agree. Failing to condemn Israel gives validity to the false and deeply anti-Semitic notion that the interests of all Jews lay with Israel. I'm pleading that you will not allow my people to be used as justification for one of the ugliest, most senseless acts of violence in recent history. The presented ceasefire resolution has my support and is a necessary first step to take against injustice. There's no world where genocide, collective punishment, or forced migration are okay, and it's my deepest hope that this world will not be an exception. Thank you.
Thank you. And last, I have Michaela Schaefer.
Steve Dallaire is on the list.
Oh, I'm sorry, who?
Steve Dallaire.
Oh, I'm sorry. Stephen Dallaire is next, sorry.
Stephen is traveling.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Okay. Hello, Mayor Selby and Council. My name is Stephen Dallaire. I am here in support of the resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. This resolution has been put together by a grassroots coalition of Olympia activists. And tonight I ask you, Mayor Selby and Council, for the support and approval of our resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The resolution was sent to all of your emails yesterday, Monday afternoon, and I ask that you read and go over the resolution as soon as possible if you have not already done that. I'm asking you, Mayor Selby and City Council, to pass this resolution now. And for the matter of time, I will share only 6 of 12 resolving points. Number 1, to call for an end to the siege and blockade of Gaza and the safe passage of humanitarian aid into Gaza. Number 2, to call for an end to all U.S. military aid to Israel and a redirection of that money into our communities to support schools, housing, and social services instead. Number 3, to support the resolution HR 3103 brought forward by Representative Betty McCollum, which prohibits Israel from using U.S. taxpayer dollars towards the unlawful detention, abuse, or ill treatment of Palestinian children, towards the unlawful destruction or seizure of Palestinian property, or towards the unlawful annexation of Palestinian land. Number 4, to support the resolution HR 786 brought forward by Representative Cori Bush, calling for the immediate de-escalation and ceasefire in Israel and occupied Palestine. Number 5, to confirm our recommitment to supporting the dignity and safety of Jewish and Muslim residents alike, and firmly stand against anti-Semitism and Islamophobia in our community. Number 6, to confirm our recommitment to supporting the liberation of indigenous peoples, both here in Washington and around the world. So I'm asking for your heartfelt consideration of supporting this resolution, Mayor Selby and City Council of Olympia. Ceasefire.
Thank you.
I very much would like us to act on a resolution calling for a ceasefire and an end to the siege at our next meeting. And I understand the intent of reaching out to the both the Islamic Center and Temple Beth Hatfiloh, and I think that can be done to consult them. But I believe there's support. I believe it's important and timely, and so I don't want us to get lost in analysis paralysis. And I also, so I appreciate the many people who come to speak to us, but I would also say we're really the low-hanging fruit and not particularly, I don't have a whole hell of a lot more influence than you do at Marilyn Strickland's office. I'll just be honest. So we have a congressperson who represents our district who has an office in Lacey. We have an Israeli embassy in San Francisco. We have places that have more to do with the decisions. So while I support us passing a resolution, I just want to say that from my perspective, it's largely symbolic and that it's expected from our city. So finding allies in places where it's unexpected will be more impactful. And I appreciate it. Thanks.
Councilmember Madrone.
Yeah, one of the commenters said, if not this resolution, then, find another one that's out there and pick one. And I see your email, so I see that you have offered some options there. As Mayor Pro Tem Gilman said, there is some outreach going on with faith leaders in our community. And I've also come across the Washington Solidarity Statement that has a lot of language in it that I personally prefer, being somebody who's not like culturally centric in this conflict in the Middle East. But there is some work going on to do some community outreach. And I think that there is interest from this council in doing something. I just want to make sure that we are, doing our due diligence and understanding the impacts of our action around this, knowing that any action that we take as a community isn't going to change anything in the Middle East. As Mayor Pro Tem Gilman was saying, we're low-hanging fruit here, and there's no action that we can take as a city council that will change the situation on the ground there. That being said, we're listening, we're paying attention. This is there's just a significant amount of pain around this issue that I think we just want to, do our due diligence and respond in a way that is responsive and not reactive.
Thank you. Councilmember Parsley.
Many of you will have heard what I said last week. You can't open up a newspaper online these days and not be impacted by what's happening. It is painful. We all agree with you. But I also agree with our Mayor Pro Tem and Councilmember Madrone. We are low-hanging fruit. Don't forget your senators. Reach out to them. We need the work done at that level. I have no problem with the resolution. I just want to hold up that I know there's some anger at our mayor-elect, but he and Councilmember Cooper and myself had a conversation with him afterwards, and he had this message for me. He said that he's engaging in discussions with both the communities that are Jewish and the Islamic faith to come up with a language that would be supported by the council, that would not cause more harm or incite hate, but would support a ceasefire, as this community is clearly asking us to do. And I think, as you've already heard from my two councilmates and I guess Mayor Pro Tem and councilmate, I think we're all for this. And just in case you haven't read it in the newspaper, the Israel-Hamas war, it appears to be that we are heading towards a ceasefire and hostages will be released. What this looks like, we don't know at this time. It's fluid, but it looks like if it goes through, it'll be for at least 4 days. This is not enough. None of us agree with that, but at least there's action.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing up that Mayor-elect Payne is working hard to help our local religious leaders move forward with a statement that we could support. And if council feels that we want to do a resolution, or, there's all these different terms for different statements that we can bring forward and support as a council. And so we are thinking deeply and feeling deeply about this. I want you to understand that it's, as Councilmember Parsley said, you cannot turn on your news apps, and not just be heartbroken over what is going on. And it's, I agree with everything that's just been said. And we will try to do something that is as meaningful as it can be for a city council in a small city in Washington state. But mostly we want our constituents that are bringing forward these incredible stories to understand that we are listening. And diplomacy is hard to find in times like this, but reading the news just recently tonight that they are trying to figure out negotiations for a ceasefire gives me hope that calmer minds over there in diplomacy are figuring a path forward for all of us out of this horrific period.
Thank you. I'm Zoltan Grossman, faculty in Geography and Indigenous Studies at Evergreen. I'm here to speak for a resolution for a permanent ceasefire. My late father was a Holocaust survivor from Hungary who lost almost his entire family. I'm critical of Israel not despite being Jewish, but because I'm Jewish and fearful of the far right in Israel, which helped fuel the rise of Hamas. There are 65 pairs of children's shoes outside tonight with candles. Each pair represents 100 children killed. 6,500 kids from October 7th to December 3rd, according to UN figures. 64 pairs of shoes represent 6,387 kids in Gaza. One pair represents both the 36 Israeli and 66 West Bank Palestinian kids. We're heartbroken for every one of them. There's no symmetry in this conflict because the occupation and siege of Palestine is so one-sided. Palestinians occupy not 1 inch of Israeli land and control not 1 drop of Israeli water. In the 15 years before this war, for every Israeli killed, there were 21 Palestinians. There's also no symmetry in our country's role. Though Biden's new conventional arms transfer policy bans arms exports to countries violating international humanitarian law, he isn't applying the policy to our #1 arms customer. We need to use this huge leverage to insist on a halt to ethnic cleansing and the mass killing of children with weapons funded by our taxes. Clinton bombed Serbia for ethnic cleansing in Kosovo, and Biden rightly condemns Russia for pulverizing cities and occupying Ukrainian territory, but turns a blind eye to the same impunity by our own ally. Free Palestine doesn't mean kill all Jews, any more than free South Africa meant kill all whites. It's a call for equal rights for the Muslim and Christian half of the Holy Land's population. The only effective way to defeat Hamas is to recognize that the secular state of Palestine also has a right to exist. Calling for a ceasefire is one step to create balance. Thank you.
Next, I have Christian Spurline, followed by Michelle Ryder, followed by Jonah Wren.
Good evening, council members. I'm here tonight to support a permanent ceasefire and peace in Gaza and the occupied territories. Just since October 7th, as of December 3rd, 15,523 Palestinians have been killed, 70% of whom are women and children. This is according to the Gaza Ministry of Health and the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. It is easy to disassociate abstract numbers from the very real people that each one represents. A mother or father whose child was vaporized, a 6-year-old girl orphaned by an Israeli airstrike on her home, wiping out generations of her family in an instant. This is not a religious conflict. A sovereign nation is violently oppressing, displacing, and murdering the people whose land they occupy and control, period. The Israeli government controls all movement of goods and people in and out of Gaza. It has been reported that Israeli officials calculated the number of calories to allow into the Strip to keep the people just above starvation. Palestinian fishermen aren't even permitted to enter international waters due to harassment and attacks by IDF boat patrols. I understand your hesitation in taking a bold stance on this issue. Most people have seen the consequences of standing in solidarity with Palestinians. You may want to seek higher office, and besides, Olympia City Council has no sway over the decisions of a foreign government. But let me ask you this. If you are unwilling to even rhetorically take a stand for what is right and just in a situation where you have no power whatsoever to affect change, why on earth would we trust you to honestly represent or advocate for us? I realize my comments tonight will likely have no impact on your decision to do the right thing, but I cannot in good conscience sit back and watch as the horrors in Gaza and the West Bank continue. However small our words and actions may seem, we hold the power to change destiny. And just as it is my duty to stand before you and call you to action, to speak out with the power you do wield.
Thank you. Next, we have Michelle Ryder, followed by Jonah Wren.
The last time I was here was early October. I'm not sure if it's been a month, so I apologize.
You're all good.
Okay.
You're all good.
Marhaba, my name is Michelle. Ha slchel is chedjaf ask wadi tubu shad shad What language am I speaking? It's the first language of this land, the southern dialect of Lashute Seed, spoken by the Squaxin people, whose flag stands behind you. I was born and raised in the Chulch at the foot of Tekolbet, here in the Puget Sound, and I've learned that loving this land means acknowledging its painful history, the history of white colonial settlement and indigenous dispossession. I am not native to here like the tribes are. Israelis are also not indigenous to their home. Israel was created in 1948. It is a young country like our own. The Squaxin people whose land we are gathering on tonight have been here for over 10,000 years. Thus, I understand intuitively and with empathy the nature of the Israeli people's predicament. That's why I am here. Through self-knowledge and education, I hope you will recognize Israel as it is, as a European settler colonial project in historic Palestine. I advocate for U.S. accountability for the historic wrongs we have committed against First Peoples, just as I advocate for holding Israel accountable for its crimes against the Palestinian people, who have been subjected to decades of military occupation, forced dislocation, apartheid, siege, imprisonment, and torture. Please don't hide behind Hamas. Look up and appreciate the wider context, 75 years of Israeli colonialism. All our missiles, ammunition, and aircraft are from the U.S. We cannot fight this war without the U.S., even for a period, says Yitzhak Brick, retired Israeli Major General. The Olympia City Council has worked hard to establish a mutually beneficial relationship with the Squaxin tribe, while dodging the question of indigenous Palestine and green lighting. I understand you don't have a whole lot of power, but I recognize you have some. So green lighting ethnic cleansing that is funded with our tax dollars. It's a contradiction with serious consequences for us all.
Thank you. Next, I have Jonna Wren, followed by Audrey Coyne, followed by Stan Moon.
Hello, my name is Jonah, and I'm addressing the council this evening as a parent. I'm aware that several of you are parents as well and should understand the depth of pain felt in Palestine and around the world. My son was born in 2014, 3 months before Israel launched a 51-day onslaught onto the people of Gaza called Operation Protective Edge, killing over 2,000 Palestinians, more than 500 of them children, while orphaning and injuring thousands more. I sat at home with my newborn in my arms in a state of heartbreak as I watched another nightmare unfold in Palestine. It's been almost a decade since Operation Protective Edge, and we are witnessing the third major bombardment on Gaza in that time, in which living conditions under siege have only worsened with each campaign of brutalization. In Gaza, a child aged 16 is now living through the sixth major assault on their people and have spent their entire life in what many have called an open-air prison. Half of the population in Gaza are children. We are watching a military assault on children and their families, and many youth in Gaza are watching their elders be displaced from their homes for a second or third time. Over the last several council meetings, we've heard from you that this is a complicated geopolitical matter that you as a council member have little power or influence over. My question for you is this: as a parent or as someone with children in your life, do you believe that keeping people under siege and brutal occupation is an effective or morally sound strategy for peace, safety, or freedom for children, Palestinian, Israeli, or otherwise? If we look at the standards being set in Palestine, at the impunity with which Israel receives from any accountability to humanitarian or recognizable international laws of war or occupation, is this a world that you can justify to today's children? And as a parent, when today's children are grown and ask what you did to stop this genocide, how will you answer them? Will you say that you have the courage to use your position to demand more than a temporary ceasefire? The city of Olympia has a long history of solidarity with Palestine, and we await your answers.
Thank you. Next, I have Audrey Coyne, followed by Stan Moon, followed by Jeff Sowers.
Hello, I'm Audrey Coyne. I'm a voting community member of Olympia for the past 10 years, where I'm thankfully raising my family. And I appreciate your update today. I'll try to edit my comments accordingly, but I am addressing the council today to call for an immediate and permanent ceasefire on the siege of Gaza, to end the occupation, and to support the community resolution. I myself didn't learn about the Palestinian people until I was 25, after watching the documentary about Rachel Corrie, the young woman from Olympia, that I think we're familiar with her story. This is the first time my eyes were opened to the truths of this region and the oppression of the Palestinian people. But at 25, I did nothing with this newly learned information. It sparked a few conversations with my friends, but we went on our ways, not thinking much about the U.S. involvement in this part of the world. And because of that silence, I have failed the Palestinian people. I knew of the oppression and I did nothing, as the world has failed the Palestinian people for the past 75 years. Now, 15 years later, I could not and should not remain silent any longer. The horrors of October 7th and every day since has confirmed that Palestinians deserve to live and to be free. Calling for a ceasefire and the end of an occupation is not a call for terrorism. It is not a call for hate or anti-Semitism. It's a call for life and liberty and humanity. And it is our duty in this community to set the example of humanity, that we do not stand for the injustices that Palestinians face daily. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm not done.
You got
it beeped at me, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, that was 30 seconds.
Can I just finish?
Yes.
Excuse me. As you consider this urgency, as the situation becomes more unbelievably dire, I ask you to listen to your community, listen to the calls from the oppressed and not the oppressor, listen to the calls that resonate in love and humanity and not in fear and hate mongering, and listen to your heart and please find your voices. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. Dear City Council members, my name is Portia Tolentino, and I am a Filipino-American artist and mother living here in Olympia, Washington. I'm here to say, permanent ceasefire now and an end to the occupation and colonization of Palestine and the Palestinian people. I feel compelled to speak because my family has experienced martial law, colonization, and military occupation. First with the Spanish, then the Americans, and then in World War II, the Japanese. My Lolo, my grandfather, survived the Bataan Death March. We know it deep in our bones. My mother-in-law, who is Japanese-American, was born in an internment camp in Topaz, Utah. And so I am under no illusion that just because I hold U.S. citizenship, me or my family, even my children, are guaranteed safety in this country. Dear Council of Olympia, I am compelled to speak for those that cannot speak and for the sake of my children. It is with them in mind that I compel you to do the right thing. We are witnessing a genocide in Gaza, and we must open our eyes and our hearts and say no more. Remember that over 15,000 people have died in Gaza, and there are thousands more missing under the rubble. I pray that you boldly take a stand and call for a permanent ceasefire now. Free Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Emily Ann Toon Walsh, followed by Bob Jacobs, followed by Karina Greenlee.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Emily Antoine Walsh. I am a pediatrician and a board-certified pediatric hospitalist. One child has been killed every 10 minutes. The pace of killing has only increased, and outside you will find the memorial, as Dr. Grossman discussed, representing each pair of shoes representing 100 children. The mode age group killed in Gaza is 5-year-olds, which is kindergartners. I have lived and worked in Israel and Palestine some years ago, and I can tell you personally that it is absolutely an apartheid system, as I mentioned in my last comments. Tonight I am just going to read from our colleagues in Palestine. At Healers for Peace, you can find a list of medical workers killed in the line of duty since October 7th. There is no doubt that the targeting of hospitals, doctors, nurses, and medical workers is intentional. Doctors Without Borders took the unusual step of calling for a ceasefire because of the concerted attacks on their staff and facilities. Dr. Ghassan Abusetta is a volunteer with Doctors Without Borders surgeon, and he has called the attack on healthcare an intentional attack to ensure the death of the population. And he has now left Gaza. In an interview with Al Jazeera, he describes that when he left Al Ahli Hospital, he said, "We closed the last remaining hospital in the north of the Gaza Strip. They left after running completely out of anesthetic medication." He says that, "I honestly, truly believe that this is part of the military strategy. Those patients are going to die. They will become infected and septic and overwhelm the patient. And that for me is the most heart-wrenching experience, knowing that all of those wounded people I had seen and I had treated, whose treatment I had started, are now being left to die. When you destroy the health system, you destroy the bakeries, you prevent fuel from reaching, and you prevent food from getting to the northern part of the Gaza Strip, you are basically denuding the Gaza Strip of all of the components of life. Statements for ceasefire for a free Palestine are not in a vacuum. They say we have not abandoned you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Karina Greenlee and I'm 19 years old. As government officials, your job is to listen to the voices of we, your constituents, and represent our values. The resolution written and endorsed by community members acknowledges the root causes of ongoing settler colonialism, Zionism, and occupation. This is the resolution we want passed. This is the resolution your constituents are asking for. Your proposed resolution mischaracterizes Israel's crimes as religious conflict. It does not address Zionism, settler colonialism, or 75 years of occupation and oppression. It does not acknowledge this brutality for what it is, US-backed genocide. 3 weeks ago, I told you the Israeli state had murdered 11,000 Palestinians since October 7th. Since then, that number has nearly doubled. 21,000 people, many of them children, are dead or missing under the rubble. In that time, your response has gone from complete indifference to a vague discussion of a ceasefire you should have demanded 2 months ago. An entire population is being murdered before your eyes, and your response is too little too late. Ceasefire is not enough. The resolution must unabashedly condemn the Israeli government and demand an end not only to the current genocide, but to an end to the occupation that has persisted for 75 years, aided and abetted by the United States. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask, I was kind of letting it slide, but we do request that people don't cheer or clap for public comment. It's just distracting and it takes up time. So thank you. Next I have Peter Lewis, followed by Eva Leach.
Hello, my name is Peter Lewis. I'm 17 years old. This is not a religious conflict. You're right, Councilman Cooper. Meeting with religious leaders is not enough. Does this resolution condemn Israel's genocide? Does it condemn the corporations who are benefiting from these atrocities? Does it condemn the US for directly aiding and supporting settler colonial genocide? This is too little, too late. What the City Council has proven over the past 2 months is that it does not care about the thousands of people being murdered in their homeland, or the millions being displaced with no access to food, water, or medical care. You are fine turning a blind eye to genocide until people yell at you enough that you propose something so watered down as to mean nothing to get them off your backs. What you've proven is that you are not for the people, nor were you ever meant to be. You are for business and electability, and human empathy doesn't quite fit into your narrative. Call for an immediate ceasefire, a complete withdrawal of troops from the Gaza Strip, and cut ties with businesses profiting off this genocide. That is the bare minimum. Thank you.
Thank you. Next I have Eva Leach, followed by Stephen Dallaire.
Hello, my name is Eva Leach. Since I last spoke, I realize that I assume most of you have seen footage from journalists on the ground in Gaza, but I may be assuming wrong if all you're consuming is Western mainstream media. That's on you at this point because we've been here week after week telling you what's going on and giving you the opportunity to do some research. I encourage you all, individual council members and folks watching this meeting from home, to make sure you explore the recent footage from folks living in fear in Gaza. Motaz, Bisan, and many other journalists are living this as we speak and are sharing footage from the ground. Thank God for cell phones, thank God for social media. At this point, if you haven't seen any footage from Gaza, consider why that might be. If you have seen footage from Gaza, any words from folks on the ground, any videos of brave Palestinians working together to pull their dead children and friends out of the rubble after an airstrike, you would have to understand by now that this is not a religious war. This is not a complicated situation. This is not difficult to understand. This is not a conflict. This is settler colonial military occupation, and we need more than just a call for a ceasefire. A ceasefire is not enough because even if the bombs stopped, Israel would continue to occupy Gaza, continue to expand illegal settlements, continue to facilitate apartheid, continue to beat, torture, maim, and murder Palestinians. Whether or not Palestinians resist and respond to Israeli oppression, the occupation continues. We, the public, demand that each of you provide statements regarding your personal stance on the following issues. Israel as an apartheid state and their military occupation of Palestine, ongoing U.S. military aid to Israel, the ongoing ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, and your personal relationship to Zionism and the pro-Israel lobby, including AIPAC, which is the only lobby in the top 20 in the U.S. focused solely on supporting the interests of a nation-state. We're all eager to hear your personal statements, and I'll be emailing you that list. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Stephen Dallaire.
Hello.
Followed by Helena Lant.
Hello, I'm Stephen Dallaire. I'm here today once again to ask your consideration upon a permanent ceasefire resolution that will recognize the genocide, apartheid, and oppression that continues today in Palestine. As you consider putting forth your own resolution, I ask that you consider that if you do not choose to recognize this war as an indigenous colonizer conflict, you are truly missing the point. So I'm here to ask, do you recognize this war as an indigenous and colonizer conflict that is a center point among the many nuances of conflict that are happening? I'm asking that you pass a resolution that includes the right for Palestine to exist, and not some watered-down resolution that gives into our hollow and sick status quo that continues to attempt to mask and downplay what is actually going on. There is no language or peace agreement that can justify the continual brutality, horror, and terror that continues every day right now in Palestine. And I believe that silence is violence, and apathy narrowly supports the position of the oppressor always. So I guess I just ask that you use your voice for our city and your position of power, though it may not seem like much to you or to me, but I do feel it is needed. And we have come here with a resolution and have not received any response yet on our resolution that we put forward. So, just here asking for a response and for a conversation, and also acknowledge, what you said before we started. Thank you for at least saying that. I also want to affirm that we are a community and we're together, and that's why we're here. Though Palestine and Israel may be far from us here in Olympia, we are not disconnected. We as Americans have a part in this war, whether we like it or not. Okay.
Thank you so much. So I've got two more speakers, and we're going to make it a little, just like a minute over. So let's go to Helena Lant, followed by Elsie Sable.
Hello, my name is Helena Lant, and I'm a constituent in Olympia, and I'm here to give my support for the resolution for a ceasefire in Gaza and encourage clarification in language around condemnation of U.S. funding of the Israeli military. As you build a committee to draft and pass this resolution, I would like to urge you to bring a diversity of voices to the table, most importantly, including those of Palestinian immigrants or Americans of Palestinian lineage. If you include the voices of those whose families have been directly affected by this genocide, we can be sure that the city's statements will be accurate and respectful of the grave truth of the genocide that has been happening to Palestine for the past 8 weeks, as well as the past 75 years. Thank you for your consideration on this highly important global issue.
Thank you. And our last speaker in chambers is Elsie Sable.
Hello, my name is Elsie. I'm 18 years old. I would like to thank you for trying to pass a ceasefire resolution, but that is simply not enough. I've lived on this beautiful land for my entire life. I grew up learning about the atrocities that the Europeans, my and most of your ancestors, committed against the indigenous people here. I grappled a lot with how could we have done this? How could we brutally murder such a large part of the population? How could the murderers ignore the screams of pain that they caused? How could we break our promises again and again, cutting off their food, water, and banning their way of life? How stupid could we have been to not see their wisdom? And how selfish could we have been to not care about them at all? Now, seeing what's happening in Palestine, I understand it a bit more because it is the same thing. just a different timeline. I don't want the same thing to happen in Palestine. I don't want the Palestinians to be viewed by some as something of the past, something that we wish we could have done better. We can do better. We can do it right now. We can call for a ceasefire. We can end Israeli apartheid, and we can stop U.S. military funding to Israel. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. So that concludes our in-chambers folks that signed up. That also filled our 30 minutes. So I appreciate the patience of those that you are waiting at home to be called on. I will definitely be calling those people that are on that list after we finish our business meeting. So at this point, also, we've been joined by Councilmember Payne, Mayor-elect Payne, and he had some words to share with us. So I'm going to give him some time now.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. Good evening, everyone. So at this point, obviously, you have heard that that the council has been working on a draft resolution which will call for a ceasefire, which we plan to place on the agenda for next Tuesday, December 12th. And I just wanted to add that I personally have led this process, and last week I held a meeting at City Hall with the assistance of Council Members Cooper and Parsley, as well as City Manager Bernie and representatives from the Islamic Center of Olympia and Temple Beth Tefillah. In the meeting, we all came to an agreement that we thought that the resolution should call for a ceasefire and also state the city's intended actions for supporting continuous engagement with impacted community members, including acknowledging and combating Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, which we know has certainly taken place directly in Olympia before and during this conflict. I have asked the previously named individuals and organizations, including the Rachel Corrie Foundation for Peace and Justice, for their feedback on the draft that was submitted to us by this coming Thursday, to give the City Council and the staff an opportunity to review that feedback and prepare the final draft for next week's meeting agenda. We've heard it said a few times this evening, despite the fact that this war is more of a political conflict than a religious one, local faith communities in Olympia are affected and likely will see the most effects from this war as it relates to domestic hate crimes. Hence the prioritization of the outreach that has been conducted to these faith communities, despite whether or not someone on an individual basis is personally religious. Many of our community members are in fact affiliated with these organizations, and they are impacted by anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and anti-Arab bigotry and racism. So the community has made it clear that it wishes for the council to introduce this resolution for consideration as soon as possible. And we are aware that we have not engaged all community members that are impacted by the war or those interested in engaging with the city on this work. However, the city is supporting efforts for ongoing continuous engagement with community members after consideration and presumed adoption of the resolution through a few actions that will be listed in the resolution, which again you'll see on the council's agenda next week at our meeting on December 12th. I do have many other comments that I'll likely save for next week, but I do want to just quickly mention the comments that are commonly referenced that I said a few weeks ago. And what I have to offer with that is you know, I personally feel that I actually spoke up about many things, including the killing of all civilians. And I also committed myself in those comments to working with my council mates on this resolution at that time. And so I do feel that my comments have been cherry picked. And frankly, I want there to be an understanding that I do recognize that Palestinians have been treated as second-class citizens in the state of Israel. I do recognize that this is a very complicated matter. However, two things could be true at the same time. And I stand by my comments, despite introducing this resolution, that Hamas deserves to be condemned for what they have done and what they continue to do. And I stand by those comments. I stand by the comments that I would like to see the hostages turned, all of the hostages. And I'm very much looking forward to continuing to lead the work of introducing the ceasefire resolution because frankly, Israelis nor Palestinians will know peace in the land until the threat of terrorism is eradicated. Thank you.
Thank you for adding that extra context around what we're bringing forward next week.
I loved.
It's a 2-minute.
I loved many of the public comments that were offered at the beginning, and the courage it takes for people to come and speak through intense grief, and comments tying the violent colonial context of the United States with the Israeli occupation of Palestine, pointing out the devastating loss of life to the violent apartheid of the state of Israel, and that a watered-down resolution for a ceasefire isn't enough. It's great to hear that you're working on one and that you're working collaboratively and transparently. I hope that's actually the case. And there will be more to address, obviously, after we've achieved an immediate and permanent ceasefire to make sure that social justice and restoration happens not just in Gaza, but here too, as it is an issue that's integrally linked with global social justice and liberation movements. So having a ceasefire resolution that has like actual substance, real meaning, and reflects the sense of urgency that exists, as well as being authentic and transparent to the constituents is a vital first step. So I really hope that that you remain true to that intention. Thanks.
Thank you. Next I have Izzy LeMay, followed by Jim Lazar, followed by Catherine Faisenfeld.
Izzy's traveling.
Good evening, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Council members, Mayor-elect, and Mayor Pro Tem, thank you for the work that y'all are doing to call for a resolution. As echoing all of the comments before, it is not enough because we must denounce the state of Israel's apartheid state. The pro-Zionist movement is the root cause of what dominant narrative and what many of our representatives call the terrorism committed by Hamas. So we must name in turn the truth of the root of terror that is committed by the state of Israel. I also want to take this opportunity to touch on the multifamily tax exemption. This proposed 8-year MFTE tax break comes with no requirements that any of this new housing be affordable. In many cases, as we've seen downtown, it will be luxury apartments owned by big corporate real estate investors. The city of Olympia is literally proposing to tax the middle and lower classes and use the money to line the pockets of wealthy real estate corporations instead of using what limited resources we have to build desperately needed affordable housing. I urge council members to oppose the MFTE tax exemption. And again, free Palestine, and we must impose sanctions and cut funding to the state of Israel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Kate Pazenfeld, and I've lived in Olympia for a long time. I've been a healthcare worker for 35 years, and I am happy for this opportunity to talk to the Olympia City Council. I really think it's a great opportunity for the Olympia City Council to speak to the terrible, disgusting siege of Gaza. It has to stop. War is obviously not a solution. Israel is violating all UN rules of engagement. The people of Gaza have no access to food, shelter, water, medical care. Our country is continuing to send military support to Israel to continue terrorizing and exterminating the people of Gaza. You have an opportunity to speak out for peace, to stop the killing and imprisonment of children, women, and men caught in this terrible catastrophe. And I want to speak again about Rachel Corrie. It was 20 years ago that Rachel Corrie died, right in this very area that was bombed today. She was from Olympia, and it would be really meaningful for Olympia City Council to honor our legacy in Gaza of Rachel Corrie's death and to be a leading voice against this war and extermination. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Next, I have Jesse Taylor, followed by Arlo Dolvin, followed by Madeline Nur. Jesse is traveling.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi. So over the past several weeks, dozens of us have come here trying to engage you in dialogue. We've provided you with educational resources and detailed descriptions of the genocide taking place in Palestine now and over the past 75 years. We've offered to meet with you to collaboratively draft a resolution that actually takes a firm stand against the genocidal violence being perpetrated against the Palestinian people. We've provided you with a list of the hundreds of local individuals and organizations that endorsed our original resolution that condemned Israeli racism, apartheid, and war crimes. And all of you have remained silent, biding your time in the hopes that you'll be able to pass some watered-down resolution that makes hollow calls for peace without mentioning the historical backdrop of Israeli apartheid and ethnic cleansing that all of today's violence is actually rooted in. You've all gotten behind Mayor-elect Payne's shameful effort to create a non-transparent process involving only 2 religious organizations that have nothing to do with the war on Gaza. This is not a religious conflict, and all of you know it. It is a conflict between colonizers and colonized, between victims of genocide and a racist U.S.-armed settler regime that is actively engaged in the ethnic cleansing of Gaza and the mass murder of children, right now as I speak. At this point, you've made it clear that you're more interested in protecting your own political images rather than picking a side. Your silence means that you are taking the side of the status quo, the side of apartheid and ethnic cleansing, the side of U.S. arms corporations profiting off of Israeli war crimes. Shame on all of you. If you will not engage us in dialogue, we will make our voices heard through protest. We will do everything in our power to disrupt and discredit your cowardly attempts to act as if you support peace while erasing any mention of the everyday violence of colonial occupation. We see what you are doing. This is a disgusting, spineless attempt to avoid firmly condemning Israeli apartheid and settler violence to protect your own public image. And by taking this stance, all of you are complicit in this violence. Ceasefire under apartheid means nothing. Ceasefire under military occupation means nothing. Your words are as empty as your hearts. Shame on all of you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
My name is Madeline Nur. I am a state worker specializing in Medicaid eligibility. The discussions around Israel are somewhat personal for me because I am put in the daily position of being the individual responsible for closing Medicaid for thousands of low-income Washingtonians, including the hundreds of Olympians who are desperate for free healthcare in this economy due to them being a penny over the income limit when our American tax dollars go towards subsidies funding free health care for Israel's citizens instead of investing these funds into the health of American citizens and workers. I want to recall Mayor Payne's words because I find a certain irony to his ability to recognize Israel's treatments of Palestinians as second-class citizens, but he cannot find the ability to condemn Israel for this while he finds it so easy to condemn Hamas. If you truly see Israel's treatment of Palestinians for what it is, then I call on you to use the correct language. Condemn Israel for their war crimes. You can pretend that you empathize with both sides, but the citizens of Olympia can see clearly which side you are on with the language you choose to use. No cherry picking needed. I agree with others who spoke today that the proposed resolution is watered down and needs to be strict on its condemnation of Israel's crimes against humanity and civilian populations. I urge the Council to call for an immediate ceasefire and an end to the Israeli assault on Gaza's civilian population, to call for an end to the siege and blockade of Gaza and the safe passage of humanitarian aid into Gaza, to call for an end to all U.S. military aid to Israel and a redirection of that money into our communities to support schools, housing, and social services instead. I want to confirm our recommitment to supporting the dignity and safety of Jewish and Muslim residents alike and stand firmly against anti-Semitism and Islamophobia in our community, acknowledging that anti-Zionism does not equate to anti-Semitism, and to confirm our recommitment to supporting the liberation of Indigenous peoples both here in Washington and around the world, and to call for an end to Israeli apartheid and military occupation of Palestinian land and the equal treatment of all people regardless of religion or ethnicity. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Nizreen El Gussein.
Nizreen is no longer signed up, but Kendra is on the line.
Right. Next, I have Kendra Oben.
Kendra's traveling.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
It has become abundantly clear over the past weeks leading up to this meeting that real, open, and honest dialogue with you regarding the U.S.-funded mass murder of Palestinians has not been possible despite multiple invitations from the community for conversation and education. You have intentionally kept individuals who are inconvenient to your agenda out of your process. Olympia is home for a community of displaced Palestinian families and individuals. By calling upon the Islam and the temple and others, you cut out the voices of the most impacted by the settler colonial military occupation, as well as their allies. I'm curious about when these dates of contact regarding the resolution occurred, because as of yesterday, it was my understanding that you had not provided communications and information requests by the Islamic Center and the Rachel Corrie Foundation. It is also my understanding that the Rachel Corrie Foundation has received no invite. In response to your comments tonight, it's important that we identify where terrorism under its many definitions arise from, most often violent oppression. The U.S. and Israel hold long histories of inflicting terrorism and funding terrorists worldwide, and I will send you more information. Israel and the U.S. put Hamas into power in the first place. When you remember that Netanyahu and others have commented multiple times on the merits of maintaining and feeding an ongoing conflict with Hamas in order to justify apartheid, torture, and occupation. When you say that Palestinians are treated as second-class citizens, this is a grave understatement. You are avoiding addressing apartheid, ethnic cleansing, and genocide under settler military occupation. I want to remind you that Nelson Mandela, a freedom fighter in apartheid South Africa, was on a terror watch list until 2008, despite winning a Nobel Peace Prize in 1993 for contributing to the elimination of apartheid. Your continued resistance to real engagement on these issues is revealing. We will not be quieted by an oversimplified ceasefire resolution. The recent ceasefire did not halt the mass death of Palestinians, nor did it provide substantial support or even pause the genocide. We are demanding you each provide statements regarding your personal stance on the following issues. Israel is an apartheid state, their military occupation of Palestine, ongoing military aid, ethnic cleansing of Palestinians.
Thank you. We've run out of time. Next, I have Desiree Tolliver.
Desiree is no longer on the line, but Kaz is available.
All right. Kaz will be our last speaker tonight.
Kaz is traveling.
Thanks. I'm doing work emails. I'm not like texting. I'm answering important emails.
Hello?
Hello.
Hey, my name is Kaz Vokun. I'm a rural resident of Olympia. I'm here to call for a resolution that calls not only for permanent ceasefire, but also release of all hostages, end of Israeli apartheid, acknowledgement of Palestine's right to exist, full liberation of Palestinian people, and an end to US-funded genocide. We're all aware that you've been putting together a counter resolution that will fail to address the root of the violence we've seen in Palestine. I've not heard a single one of you call the violence against Indigenous Palestinian families what it is, a genocide and an occupation. I think it's telling to where you all stand that not a single comment has been offered by any of you as to why you don't agree with the points laid out in our community resolution that includes full liberation and right to life. and addresses U.S. complicity. I'm offended by the lack of transparency, that those who wrote the first community resolution have not been invited to participate in the discussion, that Indigenous American or Indigenous Palestinian community have not been invited to participate in the discussion, that the Rachel Corrie Foundation has not been invited to participate in the discussion, and that you can water down this resolution behind closed doors without any sense of public discourse or accountability. I wish that the amount of public discourse that you've had on other resolutions today was given towards a ceasefire resolution. Mayor-elect Payne, you said after the in-person public comment statements that you want to see the release of all hostages. I completely agree with you, and I look forward to seeing that reflected in the resolution you've been creating that includes the release of 140 Israeli hostages, as well as the release of all 10,000 Palestinian hostages that have been unlawfully held for years. Council, I'm asking each one of you to find your voice and your humanity. I'd like you each to make a transparent statement offering your personal stance on the following issues: Israel as an apartheid state and their colonization of Palestine, ongoing U.S. aid to Israel, the violence that we are seeing as a genocide, and your personal relationship to Zionism. Free Palestine.
Thank you. So that concludes public comment for this evening. Is there any additional comment from the dais or questions for staff? Councilmember Parsley.
Just so that those might be listening, as of 5 o'clock this evening, Mayor-elect had sent out the resolution to not only those that we mentioned, but to Cindy Corey, Zoltan Grossman, and Corey Passion from the Interfaith Works.
Thanks for that clarification and updates. Mayor Pro Tem Gilman.
Thank you. I appreciate that this continued comment is continuing to give us a picture of the evolving situation, because I don't want us to, you all, I mean, we've delegated to part of the committee or part of the council to create this resolution, and I want to make sure that you're continuing to evolve the resolution as the situation evolves, because now there's between 16 and 20,000 people who've been killed. The water supply systems have been demolished, and people were told to evacuate to the south so that they could finish destroying Gaza City. And then once they got down there, they began bombing the cities in the south. So I just want us to make sure that we're recognizing that this has spiraled into something bigger and more devastating than any of the previous incursions of Israel into this occupied area, more than any of the intifada that have happened across the years. This is at a bigger scale, and this is also the largest loss of life the United Nations has ever had in any country. 102 UN relief staff have been killed and 27 wounded so far in attempting to do aid work there. So I just want to underscore that it's not a static situation, and we've been at this for about a month, and it's growing exponentially in both the amount of murder and the amount of devastation of cities and infrastructure.
Thank you for those comments, Mayor Pro Tem. There's no question we are all following this with horror.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
All right.
Dontae.
Oh, Councilmember Payne.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I wanted to thank Councilmember Parsley for that additional information that she shared, that yes, I did in fact send the email earlier this afternoon to those individual persons and also organizations who are also free to share it with others, which was the intent, and that's what we discussed in that meeting. The reason that we kept it to a small group was because we understood that we were already sort of behind the ball in terms of trying to bring something forward that all of council felt that we could move relatively quickly at the request of our constituents. And now we are hearing more feedback tonight. which I am sure we will all sit with and deliberate over in the coming week before we introduce something next week. But I will just say this. I am, I feel personally, I'm hearing all of these requests for our personal individual beliefs about what we feel on this issue. And my question is why? Is it to target specific members of our council? What exactly is the purpose of that? I'm not seeing any value in that. The resolution that we pass as a body should speak for itself. That's what we've been asked to do. That's what we've initially been asked to do. And so we are, in fact, doing that. With that being said, there will be members of our community that no matter what we end up passing, they will not necessarily like all of the words or the language or feel that we've fallen short or maybe have ignored some segments of our community. And that is the process of democracy, and we do this with everything. But I also know that there are members of our community. We are not the UN. We are not a body that typically weighs in on international affairs. I question where was all of this, activism 6 months ago for the people of Palestine. It feels very, sort of reactive, and we are the government that's closest to the members of our community, and I understand that people use us as an outlet. But ultimately, no matter what resolution we pass, we will not be able to control what happens in another part of the world. And so I just ask everybody in our community to, I understand that we all feel very deeply connected to what is happening, but we need to take a beat, stop making accusations towards individual members of our community in one way or another that insinuates that I am somehow watering down this process or doing something sinister. I will concede my personal beliefs, and in fact, I have to lead this process. And so I will do just that, just so that we can get back to the business of governing the city of Olympia on the local day-to-day issues that the community would prefer we spend more time on because we don't have a decision-making power over what happens in the Middle East. Thank you.
Well said. I've got Councilmember Parsley, followed by Councilmember Cooper.
To answer our Mayor Pro Tem, which were very good questions. Yes, we are listening and we are hearing. But we're also hoping to hear from those that we've sent this resolution to for additives, for corrections, for making it more palatable for those that we've asked. And yes, Mayor-elect is right. We've asked them to pass it on. So we have a short window here. We didn't want to make it too long, where we can take comments on this and change it.
Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Selby. I just want to take a moment and thank the mayor-elect because I've watched him and conversed with him for several weeks about this topic, and it's been really great to see you, Dontae, actually see what you just said as your job. And I think that's the biggest challenge of being on a council member is trying to figure out where my own beliefs intersect with the needs and the wants of the city. And this is one of those. And regardless of how I feel about wanting peace or having long time issues with Israel that are well programmed into the back of my mind and I'm not sure where they all come from, I've seen the mayor demonstrate what I think it's supposed to be like to be a city council member. And so I just wanted to say thank you to him for that.
Yes. Gratitude. Your way, Mayor-elect.
Takes us right to item 2A, which is special recognition. And tonight it is the pending approval of a resolution of the City Council of the City of Olympia, Washington, calling for an agreed upon ceasefire in Israel and occupied Palestine. I want to preface the reading of the resolution with some notes. We recognize that the conflicts between Israel and Palestine began well before the tragic events of October 7th. Since that day, communities across the world have responded with outrage and grief at the staggering loss of life and the thousands injured in Israel and Palestine. Tonight, our council will be presenting a resolution calling for an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Israel and occupied Palestine. We've worked on it literally right up until last night, taking in as much feedback as we could. We understand that city government and these chambers are the closest, most accessible door to power for our community members. And many community members have shown up to vent their anger at what's happening in the Middle East. We've learned from all of you. As a local elected body, we don't have the influence to sway events in the Middle East. So we've been reflecting on what our role is in this and where we might have some sway and influence. Where we landed is that our sway and realm of influence is here at the local level. There are many voices demanding that the council approve a ceasefire resolution, and there are also voices asking that we do not do one. Please know that we heard all of you. We listened deeply and sought counsel and advice from faith, educational, and cultural leaders in the community who are being impacted by the effects of the conflict. We sought out the perspectives of advocates and residents concerned with this issue. While we found shared shock and outrage about what's happening in Israel and Palestine, we also found that the leaders we talked to shared differing perspectives from each other. Likewise, even those of us on council have differing perspectives, but we're united in our anger and sorrow at the loss of life and injuries and the trauma associated with both. We accept that some in the community will think this resolution does not go far enough, and then that others will think it goes too far. Many of you will not hear your words repeated back to you in this document as you've asked. Simply put, we move this forward knowing that not everyone will be satisfied with this, with the words in this resolution. But the resolution will help us focus on our energies where we can have true influence here at the local level. It makes commitments that can be kept here in our community, like a commitment to use our resources to fight hatred and bigotry in Olympia, a promise to partner across faith, cultural, and educational communities to deepen our shared understanding and our values in Olympia. We also commit to sending our resolution to the members of the Washington Congressional Delegation, so they will see and understand our collective anger around these events. And the resolution will add Olympia's support for the congressional ceasefire resolutions HR 786 and HR 3103, which call for the promotion and protection of the human rights of Palestinians living under Israeli military occupation. We are grateful to live in a town with such a compassionate community full of members who have engaged us around this issue, and we will still listen. Thank you. So I'll now read the resolution. Whereas Palestinian and Israeli people have a shared future that is inseparable, and we affirm the right to exist for both Palestine and Israel. And whereas all human life is precious, and the targeting of civilians, no matter their faith or ethnicity, is a violation of international humanitarian law. And whereas since October 7th, armed violence has caused the loss of a staggering number of lives and has wounded thousands in Israel and Palestine, and we urge the prevention of any further loss of life or harm. And whereas hundreds of thousands of lives are at imminent risk if an immediate, sustainable, and agreed upon ceasefire and end to this war is not achieved and humanitarian life-saving aid is not delivered without delay. And whereas the release of all Israeli hostages and all Palestinian prisoners who are unlawfully detained without due process must be prioritized. And whereas this global violence may result in increased violence, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, xenophobia, and anti-Arab bigotry in Olympia. And whereas the city of Olympia is committed to the safe and humane treatment of all its residents. And now, therefore, the Olympia City Council does hereby resolve, Section 1, to call for an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Israel and occupied Palestine to end the current violence, for humanitarian aid to be given to those in Gaza, and for the release of all unlawfully detained citizens. Number 2, to commit city resources in preventing and responding to hate crimes, such as acts of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, xenophobia, and anti-Arab bigotry, as outlined in our Reimagining Public Safety Plan. Section 3, a commitment to partner with local community faith, educational and cultural leaders to begin conversations, and develop actions to reduce anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, xenophobia, and anti-Arab bigotry, and also to engage the broader community together around understanding our shared values. Section 4, a copy of this resolution will be transmitted to the members of the Washington delegation to Congress and add our support for H.R. 786 and H.R. 3103 to our federal legislative agenda. So at this time, I'd entertain a motion to pass this resolution.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Resolution passes. So this will be signed at the earliest, at our earliest convenience, and will go public on our website. So thank you for your understanding. We are now going to move on to public comment. And I want to just note that there's been behaviors, I guess you'd call them, across not just our state, but across the country, where people have been signing up remotely into city council meetings in progressive cities and acting like they belong here, or that they are from, sorry, that they are community members, but they're not. And they will start off pretty rationally, and then they lead into hate speech. So we are prepared to shut anybody down that is trying to disrupt our meeting remotely with inflammatory comments and hate speech. As well, I just want to remind, since there's a lot of people that don't normally speak, that we do have some rules around public comment. So you may address the city council regarding items related to city business, including items on the agenda. This is a limited public forum, meaning that the chair of the meeting can control the timing and you know, just how it runs. As well, I want to note that we cannot accept comments regarding any kind of a candidate for public office or ballot measure. There's nothing really current, but we are heading into a presidential year. Number 4, or my 4th piece, is that where we cannot listen or accept comments where the speaker makes a personal attack on someone's honesty, integrity, reputation, or attributes protected under Washington State's law against discrimination, including hate speech. So with that, we have a 2-minute clock. We are going to start with people in chambers that have not spoken before, and then we're going to move to people that have signed up remotely that have not spoken to us in the last 30 days. That's for fairness, because some people have been here frequently, and we want to hear from people in the first half hour that we have that we might not have heard from before. We have, let me see, 12, we have about 20 people signed up. With 2 minutes, we probably won't make it in the first half hour. But what I try to do to expedite public comment is I'll call out 3 names at a time, so you know to get ready in the queue. And if you're in chambers, you can even feel free to stand up and kind of line up so that you can come to the microphone quickly. And you know, who knows, we might be able to get through everybody in the first half hour. So I'm going to start with, in chambers, I've got Konya, followed by Eris Dialande, followed by Cora Barker.
Hi. My name is Konya. I'm a local farmer and artist. I stand here tonight in solidarity with Palestine. I read your resolution and you spoke it tonight. And in it, you failed to address Zionism, apartheid, settler colonialism, genocide, ethnic cleansing, forcible displacement. And it excludes any mention of crucial historical context or any mention of U.S. military aid. Where the endorsed community drafted resolution does address and include these vital elements, it's clear that your resolution does not reflect the interests or intentions of our community at large. You've chosen to water down the community endorsed draft resolution, and that has not gone unnoticed. I urge you, City Council members, to reconsider this resolution. I demand a resolution that actively motions towards Palestinian liberation by addressing Zionism, apartheid, ethnic cleansing, military occupation, U.S. arms supply, just to name a few. Because as we know, the flow of U.S. arms to Israel is unprecedented. No country has received as much congressionally mandated aid as has Israel. Stopping the flow of U.S. military aid to Israel is one of the biggest influences we can have in ending Israeli violence. So I don't see why this is, so why is this not mentioned in your ceasefire resolution? I can only assume that you've left this topic amongst the exhaustive list of other topics out of your resolution because to publicly address the Israeli Zionist occupation is to potentially risk damaging your public image and/or for profit. And that speaks volumes to me. I expect more from my representatives, and I'll remember this in the next electoral term. Free Palestine.
Thank you. Next, I have Eris Dialande, followed by Cora Barker, followed by Eva Leach.
My name is Avis Delande, and I'm a senior in high school. I'm here because City Council's resolution for a ceasefire in Israel's war on Gaza is not enough. Unlike the resolution drafted by community members, City Council ignores that Israel is a Zionist colonial project founded on violence and ethnic cleansing. This resolution doesn't acknowledge the United States' role in funding this genocide financially, politically, and militarily. The resolution doesn't mention racial segregation and violence against Palestinians. This resolution leaves ambiguity when the situation demands nothing less than City Council supporting an end to the violent occupation of Palestine. The community has spoken through actions, vigils, and meetings. Olympia has spoken up. Now will City Council have the courage to as well? We demand nothing less than a permanent ceasefire, an end to U.S. military support, an end to apartheid in Palestine, ethnic cleansing and genocide, Zionism correctly defined as a racist ideology, an acknowledgement of settler colonialism and the historical roots of present-day violence, Israeli war crimes and violations of international law, pro-Israel and arms industry lobbying, and laws restricting free speech and criminalizing Palestine. Solidarity. Free Palestine.
Thank you. Next, I have Cora Barker, followed by Eva Leach, followed by Cindy Corey.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, and staff. My name is Cora Barker, and I live, work, and vote in Olympia, Washington. I've come here, like many others, to bring awareness to the ongoing genocide of the people of Palestine, a genocide which has been fully funded directly by the United States taxpayers, your constituents. Upon reading this resolution, I was disappointed but not surprised to see that you haven't directly condemned the violent occupation of Palestine by Israel, an occupation that has lasted for 75 years with the blessing and financial backing of the United States. I urge you to re-examine this resolution. I urge you to explicitly condemn the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people, and I urge you to call this what it is, a genocide. Thank you, and free Palestine.
Thank you. Next, I have Eva Leach, followed by Cindy Corey. And then we are going to jump to, and then followed by Terrell Bradley.
Hello, my name is Eva Leach. I've commented many times these past couple months, actually, but many of us here have been writing to you, educating you, hopefully been giving you information that you took home and researched. We wrote a resolution calling for an end to U.S. military aid to Israel, an end to the military occupation of Palestine, and a permanent ceasefire, and many more topics, most of which were not touched on in the watered-down resolution y'all just passed. Our resolution had the support of almost 250 individuals, organizations, and businesses from our community here in Olympia. Your resolution doesn't mention apartheid or the ongoing genocide of the Palestinian people. Your resolution doesn't mention anything prior to October 7th, erasing Palestinian history of 75 years of struggle against the settler colonial project of Zionism. Your resolution doesn't mention the current forced displacement of 90% of Gazans. Your resolution doesn't mention racial segregation and violence against Palestinians. Your resolution implies that Palestinian prisoners are criminals when most of them are minors and incarcerated for bogus charges or held without trial, while also implying that the IDF is innocent, all the while massacring tens of thousands of Palestinians. Your resolution refuses to acknowledge the vast disparity in the scale of violence experienced by Palestinians versus Israelis. We will continue to show up for Palestine. We will continue to call for an end to the siege, the blockade, the occupation, the kidnapping, the starvation, the the apartheid regime, the attacks on healthcare and children. Free Palestine.
Thank you. Next, I have Cindy Corey, followed by Terrell Bradley, followed by, then we're going to switch over to remote. And Larry Jezza will be first.
I'm Cindy Corey with the Rachel Corey Foundation for Peace and Justice. I want to thank you. I appreciate that you've passed the ceasefire resolution this evening. And I also want to thank our community members who have, during the past 2 months, watched all that's happening and have taken action and continued to take action, and also have contributed a great deal to the discussion about this resolution. During my travels, I've evidenced since 2003 that Olympia is known around the world for our attention to the issue of Palestine. And I'm grateful that tonight the world will see us acting with the passage of this resolution in support of the Palestinian people in Gaza and elsewhere. I know your job is challenging and very difficult at times, and I hope very much that you'll continue the work and that this resolution will be a beginning, not the final step that you take on this matter. I do want to say that there's one area I want to address. I feel that the resolution does fail to reflect the lack of symmetry in this conflict. And it was my Jewish Israeli friend and colleague, Jeff Helper, who pounded that into my head, that there was no balance in this situation, no symmetry between the occupied and the occupier. Palestinians have lived for 75 years in an ongoing Nakba under 57 years of occupation, and according to major human rights organizations, including B'Tselem in Israel, under apartheid. So I just encourage us all to continue to learn and to work together to see what we can do to improve that situation. Thank you.
Thank you. So next I have Terrell Bradley, and then we're going to go remote.
So Tyrell Bradley, I incorrectly read the instructions and thought I was signing up to attend this meeting. I relinquished my time to everyone else.
Thank you. Welcome. All right, so we're going to go to our remote speakers, and I do the best I can in a limited amount of like 5 minutes before we go live to order these things, and sometimes I don't always get it right. So I'm going to go with Larry Jezza, followed by Daniel Stusser, followed by Kyle Schrader.
Larry's traveling. He's somewhere in the tunnel.
Mr. Jezza, you're muted.
Okay, should I start over again?
Sure.
The MFT program is not what Olympians want.
I'm so sorry to interrupt again, Mr. Jezza, but we can't hear you very well. We can barely hear you.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me see what's going on with my microphone here. Speaker, condenser microphone is on. I'm here twice on your thing for some reason. Can you hear me
It's
now?
on our end.
It might be on your end.
So if you can just speak loudly.
Okay, I'll speak loudly. I will. Okay, how's this? Is this better?
That's better.
Okay. Okay, I'll speak.
So we'll
very
start the
loudly.
timer now.
Thank you. I'm sorry. The MFT program is not what Olympians want. They don't want to pay higher taxes to give tax breaks to wealthy developers. As both Thurston County Democrats and signatories to the West Side Housing Principles have said, We need to stop giving tax breaks for market rate development. You now acknowledge that this program is not a tax loss to the city, but rather a tax shift, where the public's tax rate increases to pay for the tax giveaway. But amazingly, your response is not to restrict the program, but to expand it. Currently, this program makes taxpayers pick up the tax bill even for buildings that have $4,000 a month water view units. Support for the claim that without the incentives, market rate housing won't be built is manifestly not in evidence. J. Lark said so, and you only have to look around at the facts on the ground. Presently, 82% of the planned housing units are multifamily. There are over 1,700 market rate multifamily houses in the pipeline, most of which are not eligible for the MFTE. Lacey is growing even faster than Olympia, and yet has only one MFTE development, while Olympia has 11. Tumwater, as of 2023, doesn't have any market rate MFTEs. You're sugarcoating this bad idea by requiring some of these market rate developments to give 25% of their tax back to the city for affordable housing. But in most of the city, all you require is 5% or nothing. Imagine asking voters to pass a home fund program when 75 to 100% of the tax increase going to enrich developers and not going to affordable housing. Ask yourself, if this program were brought to a vote of the people, by what margin do you think it would fail? Olympians care deeply about housing, but also about fairness. We can do better than what you have before you, inclusionary zoning, for example, to provide housing for people in need. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Daniel Stusser, followed by Kyle Schrader, followed by Alexander Nur.
Daniel is traveling.
Good evening, council members. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Looks
can.
like you can. The timer's going. My name is Danny Stusser. I live in South Olympia, and I'm speaking to you as an individual citizen, not in my professional capacity. I'm opposed to the multifamily tax exemption as I read the draft in your materials. I see no reason to subsidize market rate housing in Olympia. I'm very interested in inclusionary housing, in housing that subsidizes people at arbitrarily 80% or less of the average median income. So I hope you'll take another shot at multifamily tax exemption, but reserve the funds for units that are for people who need affordable housing. I will relinquish the rest of my time, and thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Kyle Schrader, followed by Alexander Nair, followed by, I'm going to do those two, and then I'm probably going to, sorry, it is skipping around a lot. So I've got Kyle Schrader, followed by Alexander Nair, followed by Robert Thomas.
Kyle, it doesn't seem to be signed up correct right now, but Alexander's. Yeah, Alexander's traveling.
Okay, how about now?
Sounds great.
All right, perfect. Let's see. All right, we all ready?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to hear my voice. I'm going to do my best to speak for those who could not be here tonight as well. I'll be as clear and simple as I can. I'm not here to convince you about what's right and wrong. People far better than me have been tirelessly pointing out through every avenue that they can that the genocide happening in Palestine is dire, inhumane, and one of the most disgusting chapters in our world's history. It is also a bloody and vile stain in our great country, as we have not only stood by and done nothing as children are slaughtered, but pretend there is some justification. My elected leaders in the chamber here tonight have failed. You have spectacularly failed. You have taken a humanitarian issue and decided to play politics with it. Your craving to keep your positions of elected power have convinced you it is morally justified to sidestep this issue or speak out against the atrocities in Palestine as a justifiable measure for Israel. You have failed to do the right thing, and history will look back at your meek display of political neutrality as a damning example of the corruption of politics. I am sure plenty of your fellow chair members will tell you later you did a great job sitting there today and listening to your failures with a stoic expression. They will try and help your feelings by telling you politics and the Palestinian issue is complicated. The only way this issue is complicated is because you spend so much of your effort and time and power trying to convince a corrupt and disgusting portion of our country that you can walk both sides, that somehow you can say you hate violence but fail for months to lift the finger to save innocent lives in current peril or make any meaningful action to protect the ones who are in danger in the very near future. More children will die because you took so long to try and play both sides of a political game that results only in losers. So remember tonight when you tell yourself you did a good job handling a complicated situation, that myself and thousands upon thousands of Americans have seen you fail, and we will remember. History will remember. You will feel that shame darken any meaningful accomplishment you ever made while in office. I hope the senseless dead lives you failed to save when you had the chance haunt your dreams. It's the least you deserve. Good night.
Thank you. Point of order, I've been letting this slide, but during public comment, we ask that everybody stay quiet after there's a commenter, and that's to be respectful of other views that there might be in the room, and as well to save time. So when you clap like that, it just eats up more time on the clock. So consider that. As we go on to, next we have Robert Thomas, followed by Karina Greenlee.
Robert is traveling.
Good evening, Council. Can you hear me?
We can.
All right. Thank you for your time and for the consideration of this important issue. I would like to reiterate what many of our speakers have been saying tonight about the lack of historical context to the resolution and how we can do better and we can do more to speak to the ongoing genocide in Palestine. I want to also emphasize that there seems to be a fear from our politicians that supporting Palestine or even criticizing Israel in any way is seen as anti-Semitic, and that Zionism is historically a relatively new European phenomenon that has nothing to do with actual Judaism, historic Judaism, and actually makes the world less safe for the Jewish people, including people within my own family. I urge the Council to take more direct actions. We say that there's little we can do, but there is more in terms of boycotts, divestments, and sanctions to the Israel apartheid government that can be taken on our local level. Similar actions against other regimes have been effective and wholly warranted in this case. Thank you, and free Palestine.
All right, next we have Karina. We're back to in chambers. Karina Greenlee, followed by Peter Lewis, followed by Michelle Ryder.
Good evening. My name is Karina Greenlee and I am 19 years old. In your resolution, you demand the release of all Israeli hostages and all Palestinian prisoners. Oxford Languages defines prisoner as a person legally held in prison as a punishment for crimes they have committed, and hostage as a person seized or held as security for the fulfillment of a condition. Why do you consider the thousands of Palestinians, many of them children, currently detained by Israel as persons legally held? Why do you consider legal the actions of a government responsible for the ethnic cleansing of a population? Why, each time throughout your resolution, do you refer to Israelis and Palestinians in that order? Why do you reference Palestinians as an afterthought in their own genocide? You claim that your resolution included feedback from the community, but the resolution we put before you a month ago is the resolution we wanted passed. Your resolution does not acknowledge Zionism as a perpetuating factor in the conflict, nor differentiate Zionism from Judaism. Your resolution fails to acknowledge historical context.
It fails to acknowledge vast disparities in the scale of violence, that 20 Palestinians have been killed for every one Israeli. Your resolution does not even mention ethnic cleansing or that 80% of Gaza's population has been displaced. Your resolution does not mention the role of US military aid, nor does it condemn it. The resolution you have passed goes directly against the will of the people. In ignoring your constituents, you are ignoring the role of government, which is to be our representation. Wake up. You're trying to get reelected. We're trying to stop a genocide. Good evening.
So next we have Peter Lewis, followed by Michelle Ryder, followed by John Oren.
Hello, my name is Peter Lewis. I'm 17 years old. As a citizen of Olympia, all I can feel is shame in the people we've chosen to represent us. I have lost faith in you and the system behind you. Faced with images of children shell-shocked, bleeding from the head, parents wailing as they're pulled away from the rubble, hospitals reduced to ash and stone, leaving babies to decompose on tables, you turned away. You heard the crying, the screaming, even from your own citizens here in this room, and your solution was to meet behind closed doors and come up with a resolution that says nothing of genocide, US involvement, or the historical context of 75 years of occupation. Nowhere does your resolution differentiate between ethnic cleansing and violence against Israel. Nowhere does it condemn the US's involvement or the millions of dollars of military aid we're sending to Israel. I am ashamed of you. Never again will I trust the Olympia City Council or the US government at large that it has its people's interests at heart or that it's for anything other than profit and status quo. This resolution means nothing, says nothing, and fixes nothing. Your constituents proposed a compassionate, well-thought, and community-endorsed resolution that you have ignored. Do not pretend that you care about us. Free Palestine.
Next, I have Michelle Ryder, followed by John Oren.
Hello. I really hate being up here, I'll be honest. Marhaba, assalamu alaikum. My name is Michelle. I want to thank everyone on the council for working hard on a ceasefire resolution. Your efforts are deeply appreciated. At the same time, I wanted to stand up here one last time, I hope, to acknowledge who was missing from your process, as far as I've been informed. And that is the Palestinian voice, or a Palestinian voice. So I asked a friend of mine who is a member of the Olympia community, but wishes to remain anonymous, if he wanted to speak publicly here while acknowledging the risk it posed to him in the atmosphere of increased hate. And this is what he told me. I don't mind speaking in public, but more than being scared of being personally targeted as an immigrant, I'm afraid for my family to be targeted in the West Bank. There are numerous stories of names surfacing, and the next thing you know, an Israeli bulldozer shows up at their house in Palestine. I wish that my friend's journey to the US was rewarded with the promise of the freedom to speak freely, but it appears that Israeli repression of the Palestinian people is so thorough that no place is safe, no place truly free for our Palestinian friends to openly share their stories, hopes, and dreams. Though I do believe that if done with care and earnest effort, you could create the space for the group of people most impacted by Israel's war on Gaza. I'll end with a little bit of Arabic, the language missing from the process. El-wujud huwa el-muqawama li-ash-sha'b al-Filastini. Existence is resistance for the Palestinian people. El-alam ma'a Filastin. The world is with Palestine, as you can see today with the UN General Security Council vote. Shukran, jazilan. Sorry, I want to say gazilan, which is actually the Egyptian dialect, but shukran jazilan for your time.
Thank you. Next, I have John Oren, followed by Stephen Delaire, and we'll end our first half hour with Elsie Sable.
In 2014, Palestinian author, educator, activist, and mother Nora Erekat spoke in Olympia at the Washington Center with Angela Davis. The event was called Yet Again as Captives, Mass Incarceration in the US and Palestine. Nora and Angela illustrated the connections between the carceral systems of the US and Israel, as well as their colonial histories. I learned more of the ways in which the US and Israel do business together and of the rich and lengthy history of Black and Palestinian solidarity work as they face the same systems of racialized violence and oppression by allied colonial powers. The other week, Nora posted a question on her social media platforms. I just need to ask folks, insistent on proving Hamas is the greatest evil on earth, does anything you say, if completely true, justify an unfolding genocide? Would you apply that as a principle to deal with societies of quote unquote evil regimes, just trying to understand what's at stake here? What's been at stake for the last 75 years is the freedom, safety, and right to return for Palestinians. We know that our freedom and any possibility of true peace in the world is bound to the freedom and liberation of all occupied people. Over the past several weeks that the community has been working on getting the city council to make a statement and pass a resolution for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, there are several words in which no council member has spoken out loud: occupation, siege, ethnic cleansing, genocide. These are the words that describe the settler colonial violence in occupied Palestine. Last week, each council member was asked to make an individual statement on their stance with the hope that you might differentiate your voice from Mayor-elect Dontae Payne's fixation on the violence of October 7th without context of its causation, that you might be courageous enough to name the genocide happening in Palestine. The resolution may have passed, but you can still use your position of power to combat the repression of Palestinian freedom and solidarity work here in Olympia, across the country, and at higher levels of federal government. Will you?
Thank you. Next, we have Stephen Dallaire, followed by Elsie Sable, and that will be the completion of our first half hour of public comment.
Hello, my name is Stephen Dallaire, and I am a human being. And it's very clear to me that this issue is basic human rights and the complete disregard of genocide, apartheid, also as this issue is an indigenous colonizer issue. The complete disregard of that feels absolutely strange and cold. The resolution feels cold and heartless and like just filling in the blanks of because some people have come in here and said some things and now we have to do something. And it's okay. Like I realize you guys don't have a lot of power. You're just our city council or whatever. You know, maybe that's the way you feel about your position and maybe that's the way I feel too. But also in basic human rights, I feel like it's imperative that we use our voices. And also, Mayor-elect Payne, I just wanted to respond to something that you said last week about, you know, why are people now just attending to this issue about Palestine? And I also just wanted to respond to that defensiveness that you have about this and say that the time is now, and when things rise and when the consciousness of things rise here and now, to where more people in the public eye realize and recognize that this is something that needs to happen, the time is now. There is no other time. And that's just something I want to say. And also, you know, I hope that you're not proud. I also remember you saying that, you know, that you're proud of this. So, you know, hope you go home and just aren't proud. Thank you.
Next, we have Elsie Sable.
Hello, my name is Elsie. I'm an 18-year-old living here in Olympia. First of all, I would like to thank you for trying to pass a ceasefire resolution. And I would also like to thank you for the adjustments that you made to it, for removing, this is from what I remember. So I thank you for removing the use of the human shield narrative. And also thank you for asking for the release of all Palestinian hostages instead of just the agreed upon ones. However, these are low-hanging fruit and lacks many critical components that all of the wonderful people here already told you about. So instead, I'd like to use my time to put this into perspective one more time. So I'd like to hold 1 second of silence for every 200 people killed in this conflict. For Israel, that is 1,147 deaths, which is 5 seconds. Thank you. And now on the Palestinian side, we have 18,200 deaths, which amounts to 91 seconds, which we do not have. So I will spend the rest of this time in silence, and I hope you'll join me.
Thank you. And now I will open up the dais for any questions or comments. Start with Councilmember Madrone.
Thanks everyone for being here. So as I'm sure you're all aware, last Friday, the United States was the sole vote to veto a resolution from the United Nations that would have called for a humanitarian ceasefire. And I'm really glad that we have a resolution in front of us this evening to show that we do support an immediate and permanent ceasefire with unanimous support from the Council. I do think that that's really powerful. And I think there's also legitimate criticisms of the resolution, including what Cindy Corey mentioned. It fails to reflect the lack of symmetry. You just mentioned the death toll, but there was just another update from Al Jazeera this evening. 18,412 Palestinians compared to 1,147 Israelis. So that's the lack of symmetry that we're talking about. And I really, really appreciate everybody who has spoken to us in public comment, reached out, met with us, emailed us about the occupation in Palestine and the war in Gaza. This is a human rights issue. It's a civil rights issue. And I really appreciate the people who are keeping Palestine front and center and those who have been doing that work for decades. It's too easy to bury ourselves in the day-to-day business of the city and of our lives and forget that the people of Gaza, almost half of which are 18 years old or younger, are living in constant loss, fear, and trauma. And that demonstration of all those children's shoes, I was moving. So thank you for advocating. Thank you for educating on this issue. I've learned so much, and I've committed myself to paying attention, learning as much as I can about the history and the present situation, and doing what I can to help. I am a different person because of your activism.
Thank you. I have Mayor Pro Tem.
Want to echo Councilmember Madrone's appreciation. And also to call out that in the resolution that passed today, besides broadly calling for a ceasefire, it calls upon us to continue a discussion, a learning and a discussion in the community. And as the last public commenter said, you're all wonderful people. There are also wonderful people who have different understandings about what's happening. And I think that's one of our jobs, is to create, as Dr. Grossman Zoltan was suggesting, more people to start having a picture of the map, more people starting to have a picture of the history, so that we can have a conversation that's not just polarized, taking sides. So I'm hoping that you'll continue to push us to really make true having the pledges that we made in the resolution, to have a continued discussion, because it won't have legs without a push. So I really appreciate your being here. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Councilmember Parsley.
We are all changed after October 7th and before. Your words have been heard. And I have to echo Councilmember Madrone and Mayor Pro Tem. It's pretty emotional to sit up here and see your pain and open up the e-news and see the pain. It's a tough road. But I also wanted to highlight, and what I fought hard for, and the council unanimously agreed, it's not just enough to say we agree with a ceasefire, but we have to commit to actions going forward and getting an understanding and bringing all the voices in and seeing what we can do for the future. That's what's important to me about this resolution. It's not just our statement, but we are committing to something.
Thank you. All right, we are now going to move on to adoption of our consent calendar. I need a motion.
So moved.
All right, I've got several polls that I put my so
Point of order.
Point of order. Persons in the audience shall refrain from behaviors that disrupt the public meeting. This includes, I move for immediate recess. Good evening and welcome to the extension of the Tuesday, December 12th, 2023, 6 p.m. business meeting of the Olympia City Council. For the record, we have a quorum with Council Member Payne remote, and as well, we are coming to you from room 207 at City Hall. And I will have our City Attorney, Mark Barber, explain why we are upstairs.
The council has moved to room 207 to a secure location due to the fact that the council meeting downstairs in council chambers was interrupted by a group of protesters. This is pursuant to RCW 42.30.050 of the Open Public Meetings Act.
Thank you for that. So at this point, we need to go back to our public commenters who have been waiting patiently. I have a list of who is still in the queue, so this should go pretty quickly. Kelly, we're going to start with Nicole Hughes, followed by Kyle Schrader, followed by Jesse Taylor, and the timer is back up on the screen.
Nicole is traveling.
All right, so Nicole Hughes will start us off. We
Hello.
can see you.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good evening. My name is Nicole Hughes. I am here today to express my deep disappointment with the city's adopted ceasefire resolution. As a matter of principle, I disagree with the opening premise of the resolution, which affirms the right to exist for both Palestine and Israel. States do not have an inherent right to exist. People do. No state has a right to exist except by the mutual consent of those it purports to govern. As an apartheid state, so-called Israel intentionally and proudly disenfranchises its non-Jewish residents, thereby negating any legitimacy it presumes to have. The resolution that this council passed earlier this evening fails to recognize the root causes of the ongoing genocide of the Palestinian people, which are the past 75 years of settler colonialism, white supremacy, land theft, apartheid, and US-funded military occupation. Instead, the city's resolution vaguely frames the conflict in Palestine as one of a religious nature, which it fundamentally is not. In addition to being misleading, this framing also ignores the many anti-Zionist Jewish voices that are engaged in the fight for Palestinian liberation, including my own as your direct constituent. I'm also dismayed by the process by which the city's resolution was organized and drafted, which did not include input from the Olympia residents who have come before the council of their own accord to advocate for a permanent ceasefire. Through this opaque, limited process, the city instead prioritized alignment with local Zionist-affiliated interests. In closing, I would like to again express my support for the grassroots organized resolution that was transmitted to the Council in November, Free Palestine.
Thank you. Next, we have Kyle Schrader, followed by Jesse Taylor, followed by Judy Barden.
Kyle has since dropped off the list.
Okay, so we'll go to Jesse Taylor.
He's traveling.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. I don't have very carefully prepared comments tonight. I was busy with some other stuff earlier. But just wanted to say that this process that you did, I'm sure you heard from plenty of people earlier tonight, that it was pretty disappointing. And all of you have a very visible position. Last week, Dontae Payne, asked like, why do we care what your personal opinions are? And the thing is, you all have, and you asked if, yeah, you're shaking your head. You asked if we were gonna, target you individually, and it's like what we want to. You have a very visible position, and you can use that position to influence things. You're talking about how y'all don't have any influence over the Middle East, and then Cheryl Selby says that she's just getting back from a trip from the COP28 in the Middle East. Y'all have visibility and influence, and it, and you can use that position to do the right thing. And it's not that hard. It's just a matter of being a decent human being and speaking out against the mass murder of children, against ethnic cleansing, things that you've seen all of the evidence, and what you're doing. You're deliberately removing these things from this resolution, and there's no excuse that you are doing it out of ignorance. There's like a choice that you're making, a conscious choice to do that, which is just really disturbing. Honestly, it's just like shows this sort of like self-serving, like just selfish behavior, where you're so concerned about maintaining office and not displeasing, trying to walk this middle ground where you don't upset anybody, that you literally can't even condemn the mass murder of children. And I don't know how those of you who are parents can look your kids in the eye. It's really, honestly, just really sad and disturbing. And I'm glad that everybody delegitimized your process tonight. And it's a shame. Thank you.
We are on to public comment. And nobody has signed up for public comment, either remotely or in chambers. And if I were just more generous at this point, I'd say anybody want to come up and talk, but I'm not going to do that.
Hope you liked this video. Thanks for watching.